and welcome back once again to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. My hat is on my head. Let's get into the Meno. That's where we are today. Now, exciting stuff. You should be excited because everything we've been reading so far in Socrates has been about the significance of a little something we call the dialectic. What the heck is the dialectic? Socrates has called it many things so far. In the Republic. Oh, hi! Welcome to the channel. Welcome to new chatters. I hope you enjoy. In Plato's Republic, Socrates, thumbs up. Socrates talks about the dialectic as the ultimate study. All other studies in training to become a philosopher king leads to the dialectic. It's what he calls the capping stone, what we might call the hyparxis, the stone at the top of the pyramid. Now, of course, the philosopher king doesn't just mean the person who should rule the city. The whole republic is a metaphor to the soul. What is the highest kind of person you can be? What is the excellence of humanity? And also, in other texts like the Phaedo, he talks about it as the exercise that we have to do if we want to reach truth and being. Okay, if we want to experience the highest dimensions of reality with our mind, not just the physical world. Notice mind isn't physical. Our brain is physical. Our eyes are physical. Our ears are physical. We perceive through those organs the physical world, but our mind ain't physical. Many people have had various experiences separating from their body. In fact, all yogas have at their essence, how do we separate our consciousness or mind from our physical body? In the Phaedo, Socrates talks about how that's the essence of philosophy. So you could call philosophy, well, he does call philosophy, the art and practice of dying and being dead. Because once you're out of your body, what we normally call being dead, there's stuff you can do. Okay, and that's one of the mysteries of the Phaedo. What do you do? Where do you go? Because there are various different places that are talked about in the Phaedo that you can go. And you will go to some of them when you die, depending on how well you do your work here. This is one of the bigger teachings in the Phaedo. What we do here has, well, in all of the text really, but the Phaedo is more specific because it's Socrates' last hour alive. There are lots of things we can do here, and it affects where we go when we die. Some places will be available to us, some places won't. But also our training, what he calls our education and nurture, affect how well we can fare in that other reality. But Socrates says, by the way, this isn't just for when you kick the bucket, as we say, but while you're alive, you can die many times. You're supposed to be dying many times, which is kind of funny when you think about it. In order to live well, you have to die well and die often while you're alive. Now, of course, dying means separating the soul from the body. Now, there are, of course, many different yogas or methods or meditations or spiritual traditions that have that at its essence. But we want to figure out what Socrates says is the best form. Because Socrates says, by the way, this is the true spiritual tradition. And he makes that funny comment, many are the staff bearers, many are people who call themselves spiritual and walk around with the staff. What we might say today, many are those who shave their head or wear a big funny hat or wear a robe, start a cult. But philosophy is the true method of spirituality, which is a big statement. And he goes on to say, by the way, if you can do this and master this, you can create yourselves better spiritual traditions than we find around us. Better than Homer and Hesiod. For us, better than the Bible and the Vedic scriptures and Buddhism and Judaism. Better than all of that. We can go beyond all that. by simply understanding the actual spiritual tradition. Now, if there is an actual spiritual tradition, there must be a kind of model. This is key. For instance, if you want to learn, I don't know, what's another thing that we accept there is a true form of? An easy one is fixing your car. There's a right way of fixing your car. There's only one place where you can put the spark plug. There's only one place you put the petrol. You can't pour the petrol into the driver's seat. It's going to make your car not work and be very stinky. You put the petrol into the petrol hole. Now, I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know what the petrol hole is called. But we all understand that there is an understanding. We wouldn't let a 4-year-old decide how to fix your engine. Equally so, we wouldn't let someone who has no understanding and experience in being a mechanic fix your car. So why don't we apply it to spirituality? Well, we do. That's philosophy. That's what Socrates is saying. Do that. Be what we would call mature and rational. Which means anyone can be a mechanic so long as they understand the model, the blueprints of how a car works. And as we said, they gain an understanding and they put that into experience. So too for philosophy. What is the model for our psyche, our soul? We might call it our mind or our soul because it inhabits a body, or our psyche or our consciousness. Lots of different words you could call it. What's the model for that, and using that to navigate reality so that we can understand it and experience it, just like a mechanic. Now, the fancy word for a model, the model, is paradigm. Paradigm. What's the paradigm for consciousness? Or, oh, by the way, Socrates says this paradigm is not just for reality, it's for thinking and conversation itself. Now, we in this channel, we go a step further and say, hang on a second. If there's a paradigm for mind, and reality, because we use it to navigate all the different levels of reality that we can experience, both in this life and in the next ones. And it's also the paradigm used by whatever mind, same thing, mind, intelligence, creates and sustains this physical world. Then it should be the same paradigm we see everywhere. What's another understandable system like fixing a car that we discover in nature? Geometry. Or astronomy. How do the planets move and why? Music. Music is something that has terms, notes, relationships, harmonies, that have an arrangement, that have an order, that can be understood, and you can use that understanding in experience to do something well. Which is why on this channel, we have a series where we explore music to discover that paradigm, or what Socrates calls the logos of music, as a way of having fun, becoming better musicians or better listeners of music. The more you understand, the more you can perceive, but also to discover this paradigm. So what's this paradigm? Well, formally it's called the logos. And if you were to ask me to give a definition, I would say this. Oh my God. Because I have been searching for a definition of that for 20 years. It's one of the first questions that brought me into philosophy. What exactly is this mysterious word called logos? And that's important because to answer it, you have to do something. You have to collect terms that relate to the logos. What are the ideas that are associated to the logos that Socrates uses? Collect them. But then you have to organize that collection in a certain way to bring it together, to see how the parts fit, just like a car. What are the parts of a car? We've already mentioned the petrol hole and the spark plug. and the carburetor. And the distal flange, I'm imagining, is probably something that is in a car somewhere. I don't know. Now you have to get those parts from the right source. So a mechanic handbook, maybe. You don't look to, I don't know, the Bible to learn how to become a mechanic, of course. You don't look to, I don't know, Harry Potter. You have to go to the right text. For the soul and the logos, it's Socrates, a master of the dialectic. Everything since Socrates has been a diminishment or a distortion of Socrates. Thankfully, we have the Balboa text, which actually translates it without all of the terrible, ridiculous mistranslations that have been in all of the other translations. We've got the actual Greek, so good for us. So we can actually read it properly. It gives us the terms, but then we have to structure those terms into a whole to gain understanding. How does the car work as a whole? Now you can apply that to anything. What's beauty? Pick out the terms from Socrates, from these texts that we read, and then arrange them yourself. You have to do the learning. You are the apprentice mechanic, into your own whole that gives you an understanding that you can use to do things. So be it beauty or logos. That's why when I asked what is logos, I didn't get any answers from any philosophers. In part because that would be ruining the game, because it would take away my mystery and my puzzle to solve, but also because they're still working on it too. You can keep developing your understanding, and logos is probably the richest thing that you can continually gain deeper and deeper understanding about. Because in terms of things that exist eternally, like beauty and goodness and justice and mind and reality, logos is right up there at the top. Because even those things have to be ordered in a certain way, have to be understandable, have to have a relationship within themselves. That's metaphysics, understanding the relationships between those eidos, or aspects of the metaphysical realm, being. So they have to all be participating in some kind of model as well. There's the logos. So the logos has to kind of pre-exist or exist in the primarily or first for those other things. Which means just as we learn about justice and the soul and being and beauty, all of these things we want to know for certain and experience, logos is at the top. And we learn those things our whole lives because philosophy is a relationship. We can continually, while the experience is a thing, a oneness, you can always see new connections and understanding. And logos is right up there in the top. So, how do we structure all those terms we're collecting and all those insights we're gaining our whole lives as a philosopher in that journey? What's the structure? There it is. The dialectic. Dialectic. Where is my little touchpad isn't working. Let me just turn on my Bluetooth. It's on. Magic touchpad. There we go. Dialectic. Dialectic is the structure in which you can organize all of the insights and terms that you pick out from the appropriate textbook, which for us is Socrates or Plato. Plato writes about his teacher Socrates. And we have fun comparing it to the moderns, which do the exact opposite of philosophy. And it's funny for us because in a lot of these bless me, like the one we're reading right now, the modern view of philosophy is represented by the guy who's the dope, Meno. Meno is the guy who thinks he knows what philosophy is, thinks he knows what virtue is, asks Socrates like a question, or can it be taught? Like a lower question. And Socrates is like, oh, slow down, son. can it be taught? Don't you want to know what the thing itself is? Oh yeah, I know that. I went to school and learned philosophy. The exact same problem we have now. The way philosophy taught is the opposite. So it can be even more difficult for people who are passionate about philosophy to get into real philosophy. Because if they're passionate and they've spent time and money going through the modern education system, they have been learning the exact opposite. So they have to unlearn a lot of that stuff. Or not unlearn it so much as discover why it's so off the mark. In its content and also historically. Why did we deviate from Socrates so significantly? Why did he get put to death by those people in charge? And those people in charge, when Socrates, who killed Socrates, they didn't suddenly lose their power because Socrates was so brilliant. They're still in power. But we're here to turn it all around. By understanding the paradigm of understanding, the paradigm of wisdom or knowledge, the paradigm of the psyche. What is that paradigm? Well, the dialectic. So, dialectic means two, so you can understand the dialectic in terms of two things. The subject, which we often call self. What do you want to understand? The logos, we could say, make S the logos. But to understand it, you have to rub it up against something. You have to establish relationships. That's the other. What are you going to compare the logos to? Because when you want to understand an engine or a car, you have to understand the car itself, but also how it's used to do stuff, to drive to places, or to race really fast if it's a race car. Otherwise, you don't really understand a car. You've got to understand how it's used. So for the logos, you might want to say, how does the logos affect us as a philosopher, let's say? So two. Simple. Isn't that interesting? The paradigm starts with one idea, the logos or whatever you want to understand, and breaks it down to two. Isn't that fascinating? And that two, we break down even further. So, two starts with the two. And how many ways can you arrange that two? 4. Self to self, self to other to other, other to self. That's all. So those are the 4 categories of the dialectic. Simple. That's it. That's the model. That's all we do. So you talk about going to mechanic school. People spend 2 years, 5 years learning to become a mechanic. Now, what's more important, your car or your soul? What's going to last longer? A car that might last 20 years? Or if you have many cars, lasts maybe 80 years if you live till you're 80? Or your soul, which is 80,000 years, because that's, no, not 80,000, 100,000. Hello, welcome to the chat. No, 80 billion years. No, infinity. Your psyche is eternal and immortal. So if you spend 5 years to learn about cars that you can maybe use for 60, how long do you want to spend learning the paradigm of the dialectic, which lasts eternally, and is your ticket to the higher reincarnations? And in those higher reincarnations, Socrates in the Phaedo talks about meeting different kinds of people, and they're going somewhere else, so you need to be able to navigate their journey. So it goes even beyond what Socrates calls in the Phaedo escaping the prison of reincarnation. There's more to it. So how long do you want to spend learning the dialectic? Now, if we did the math, let's say you spend 5 years to become a mechanic that you can use for the next 60 years of your life. So we'll divide that by 5. Therefore, how many 5s go into 60? 12. Yes, knowing existence itself. So, wait, that doesn't right. That's not right, is it? 5 years. Yeah, okay, 12. So, it's 12. Okay, so let's see, how long should we be learning about the dialectic? So that this is 12. Because we can use the dialectic eternally. I'm not very good at math. For those who are good at math, can you figure out what this equation is? Because this will give us how long we should spend our time while we're alive learning about the dialectic. So, I'll wait for comments in the chat. But, hey, I can't read your writing. What? Okay, here it is. I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you spend 5 years to become a mechanic that you can use for 60 years. Because you can't take your skill as a mechanic with you after you die, of course. So, the dialectic is the paradigm of understanding and navigating reality. Use it in your understanding. It's the paradigm that's used to unfold creation, and so on and so on. It's what Socrates says is our destiny to do while we're here and our purpose. In the Phaedo, he talks about the consequences if you don't do it, to what you experience in the afterlife and what you're going to come back as, which isn't usually bad. So it will be used for infinity years. So if we all accept this is rational, you spend 5 years to becoming a mechanic in your training of the paradigm or the model. This is all theoretical. No, it's literal. Literal, it's not theoretical. What's the difference? Well, if you were to become a mechanic, you would say, well, you learning how the parts of the engine fit together, that's all theory, right? And you would say, yes, theory is part of it. That's the understanding part of it, to learn how the pieces fit together. The blueprints of how the engine and the car work. You have to learn it. But then you take your understanding and you put it into experience by fixing an engine, fixing a car. So you have to do both to gain mastery or learning. Now, learning, let's say that you need both to learn, but also we want to get the excellence. What if you lose your mind at 37 and get dementia? Well, I don't know. How does that fit to what we're talking about? Can you create an analogy relating to how long you should spend, learning a particular thing in relation to how long you can use it? So you're saying, why should I spend 5 years as a mechanic when I'm 18 if I'm only going to use it until I'm 37? So what's that? So 5 years, 18, 19, 20, 23. So you use your skill as a mechanic for 15 years. Is it worth it? I don't know. Are you going to earn enough money? Maybe you really enjoy fixing cars, and even though you spent 5 years training to become a mechanic only to use it for 15, maybe you really enjoyed those 15. It's a good question. Of course, we don't know that we're going to die at 37 or whatever. So, but we accept it's fair enough to spend 5 years learning a skill or a trade that you can use. Yeah. So learning, we want to get mastery because we're not just wanting to be able to do it. We want to do it as best as we can. Otherwise, we're not really in the game of philosophy. We want excellence of the soul. We want to experience all of reality. We want to know the meaning of life. We don't want to be blind or stupid or less than our full potential. Okay, so learning to reach mastery that you can then use in an art to benefit yourself, your soul, your journey, and maybe others too if you have friends. Fix their car. Okay, we're talking about philosophy. So what are we going to benefit with the dialectic? Not other people's cars as a mechanic, but their souls, their self, their nature, how they're going to die, how they're going to live, what their incarnations are going to be like. In the Phaedo, Socrates says, free ourselves from the chains of our ignorance and problems and from the prison of incarnation. So, you're right, so it's not just theory. So again, this is how philosophy is taught. It's all just theoretical. There is no such thing as a soul. Or maybe there is a soul, but who knows? Maybe Kant thinks there is, and Hegel thinks there isn't, and Nietzsche thinks there is, and that's all different people's opinions.
He didn't know what solipsism was. He didn't know what deontological moral philosophy was. He didn't know what utilitarianism meant.
So you can talk in that way. I look at all the fancy words I know to back up my personal opinions or theories. Now, what we're saying, what Socrates is saying, that's not philosophy. That's the opposite. That's called philodoxia. Why? Because theories and opinions are not based on a model. If someone came to you and said, "Oh, I can fix your engine there, buddy," it's like, "Oh, really? Have you learnt the understanding of the model?" Oops. Or paradigm for how the car works and how to fix it as a mechanic? And they say, "Oh, no, I just have a theory. I just have an opinion." What? No, get out of here. No way. "Oh, no, but I can quote people and say, oh, Kant has this opinion." What? Who cares? Was Kant a mechanic? Who knows? You can never know in philosophy. Then why are you quoting Kant to say you can fix my car? What about Hegel? I can quote him. I spent a lot of money at school to learn different quotes from different old white guys, pretty much, European philosophers in their tradition. Who cares? Did Kant know the paradigm? Who knows? Did Hegel know the paradigm? Who knows? No, not who knows. That's a question about people. You're quoting again. Instead of asking who knows, what knows? What, not who. What is the model or paradigm? That's what we're asking in real philosophy. So your question in chat, is this just theory? Or just opinions? Or is there a truth that is understanding? If there is such a thing, there has to be a model and paradigm for it. In other words, anyone can be a mechanic so long as they learn the model for how the car works. There's no gatekeeping in being a mechanic. Black mechanics and white mechanics and women mechanics and men mechanics. Doesn't matter. It's not physical. The paradigm isn't physical. Okay? But you don't just say, I'm a mechanic because I understand it. You have to also put it into experience. You need both. Now, this is what is rejected by modern philosophy. You can't experience the soul. You can't experience the other dimensions. You can't experience what it's like to be dead. Why? Because that means there's no model. There's nothing to prove the paradigm is correct. so you can earn a lot of money passing on your personal opinions as a teacher. That's what we're seeing in the text. Meno has paid a lot of money to a teacher whose personal opinions is valued by his society and Meno's family. Maybe, and one of the questions have why? Because Meno's idea of what the excellence of the soul is being able to hurt your enemies and benefit your friends while escaping any punishment yourself. Why would someone from a rich and powerful family like that opinion, I wonder? And why would they pay the big bucks to some smart-sounding person, what we might call today a modern academic or even a grifter? There are some people who, especially on YouTube and the internet, they make a lot of money in their personal courses. All they're selling is their opinions, what it means to be an alpha man, what it means to be a pickup artist, like Jordan Peterson and those sorts of people, and Andrew Tate. Why would people spend money to find someone who is famous and smart sounding to present their own opinions back to them as though it's true? I wonder what would be so appealing to have people say, you know, all the opinions you already have? Oh, yeah. Well, they're all right, by the way. I knew it. I knew I didn't have to learn anything and go through the effort to uncover all the false beliefs I carry about myself and the world. That's hard, and that requires courage and self-reflection. Oh, I like you telling me all my opinions are the right ones. I'm relating mechanics to what you're doing now is all functioning. Right, that's good. So we're seeing how this relates to philosophy. Yes, I'm not getting my car fixed by someone who has a theory or opinion. Yes, you want them to be able to show that they have put their understanding, not opinion. It's not an understanding of your opinion, but of the model. So anyone can open the textbook, but have shown that they've put it into experience to actually do things. And how well is their level of mastery? And how well can they use it to benefit you and your car? Socrates is saying the exact same thing is, right, I have a concept of a plan. Very funny. Right. Socrates is saying the same thing is true for our soul. Okay, Meno has come from a culture almost identical to ours, you could say, where they don't think this way. They think philosophy is paying people that sound smart and they can quote people.
Have you read Brand at all? Have you read Nagel? What about Scanlon? Have you read Scanlon or Scruton or Edmund Burke? Have you read C.S. Lewis? Have you read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Have you read Immanuel Kant? So you know Flick.
What is this guy?
Okay, people who talk like that to justify the opinions you already hold. That's Meno. Socrates is saying, no, that's not philosophy. You can't use that to gain understanding. And the understanding we want to gain is what is virtue? What is virtue or the excellence of the soul? In other words, if you've gone to all this money, paid all this money and gone through all this time, how come, Meno, when I ask you to define virtue, how we should live, or the excellence of a soul, how come you can't do it? How come you can only point to physical things that back up your own personal opinion? Oh, look at that ruler. He blew up all his enemies and got all their monies. That's virtue. Look at that woman. She doesn't get to rule the city. So virtue of a woman isn't ruling a city. It's ruling a household and a kitchen. And look at those slaves. I'm not going to say whether or not it's good and virtuous and excellent of your soul to accept slavery and have slaves. No. I'm going to say, part of excellence means it's different for a woman and different for a man and different for a slave, because a slave can't control a state, can't even control a house. So let's check in with the, so that's Meno, right? He can only point to physical things. He can't give an understanding of the paradigm. Now, what is actually virtue? Not how it's used. And by the way, if you don't know the paradigm, you don't know if it's being used well or not. How do you know that having a slave is actually the use of virtue if you don't know the model? And Meno says, not only do I not know the model, well, he hasn't admitted that. He says, I don't know how I can use it. I don't know how I can go from the many examples to the one definition. In other words, he hasn't got the model of understanding that he can use and experience to gain an understanding of what is true. Not true for slaves and women and men, true for all people. Not true for this part of history, where it might be fashionable to do this or that, and then 100 years ago it was fashionable to not give women rights or not allow women to vote, and then in 200 years it's going to be different. No, my friend. True forever. Forever. Because that's a definition. Meno can't do that. So what? So Socrates is in the text saying, I am going to give you a model. And he actually uses the Greek word paradigm. He says, Meno, have I given you enough to use it? And Meno tried, but failed miserably. He literally just quoted someone who had an opinion he liked. He said, I like this poet. He says virtue is desiring beautiful things and being able to acquire them. This is an opinion that grew up with my upbringing. Now here's a question for you. Do you know people, when they think of what it means to be good or live well or have the excellence of the soul or virtue, they just look to poets or religiously inspired people and quote them? But they never quote people from outside their upbringing. They don't quote a Jew or a Muslim if they're Christian. They only quote people who happen to already agree with the opinions they share. Do you see people like that in your life? When they go to the pub, if someone has an opinion they already share, they buy them a beer. If someone has an opinion that they don't have, they get mad and they do a fisticuffs. Oh, I'm going to fight you. My dad knew what it means to be good. I learned from my dad, and my dad says this, and my mum said this, and my mum was a Satan. I'm going to fight you. All right? We're doing something else. We're learning to be mechanic of the soul, which involves separating our allegiance from the opinions we were raised with. If you were Meno, rich, handsome, from a rich family, then of course you would have these opinions. It's virtuous to be able to hurt people you don't like and get away with it. Yeah, no doy. That's what Trump says. I'm good because I don't pay any taxes. I don't want other people to pay taxes. To me, I want to get the benefit from having roads and water and things. But I'm clever if I can. Is the background music too loud? What do you think, guys? Is the background music too loud? Let's take a vote. One's in chat if the background music is too loud. Two's in chat if it's fine. So we're learning the paradigm. That's where we are in the text. Learning the model that will help us to understand how to understand things and how to reach truth. One means, what does one mean? Does one mean too loud? I forgot. Okay, I'll turn it down. All right, it's 2 ones. Ones have it. Okay, there we go. How's that? Is that better? Right, that's what we're doing. Socrates says, I've given you the model. Can you use it? No, he just quoted someone else. It's all right. Okay. So now we're at the part of the text where Socrates is breaking it down even further. Socrates has already used the dialectic at least twice. to define what virtue is, and it wasn't convincing. This is Socrates, perhaps the wisest, smartest, kindest, best human being to ever walk the planet. Even when somebody who is actually interested in learning virtue, maybe, meets Socrates, and Socrates actually unfolds the dialectic, didn't change his mind. So we've got a question: how come it didn't work? If you go to a master mechanic, if you go to the guy who's the top mechanic for McLaren or whatever, and he says you need to fix your car this way, everyone would go, dude, sure, I'm with you, man. You're the McLaren head mechanic. Do it, dude. Why is it hard for us to do that when it comes to our opinions about our soul and reality? Why is it different? That's a question. Because this Socrates is like the McLaren mechanic of the soul. All right, so that's where we're in the text. He's outlining what we need because he's in a conversation with Meno, but he's in a conversation with you. Because you might be a better kind of person than Meno. Is that rude to say some people are better than others? No, it's the truth. Some people are better mechanics than others. Is that rude to say that the McLaren mechanic is better than my Uncle Bill, who has never fixed a car in his life? No, it's just the truth. What Bill wants to do about it is different. So when we say some opinions are harmful and stupid and wrong, of course, no doy, of course, because you can have an opinion about anything. I have the opinion that it's good to throw kittens in the air. Obviously, that can be bad, or that is bad. What we do when we discover that our opinions might be bad or harmful, that's our character. So we can ask, because we're in a question in this text, what is the virtue of our soul? We can add that to our question. Is the virtue of the soul something also to do with being open to learning? Catch the kitten, yes. To being open to challenging our beliefs, to be open to being uncomfortable when you hear that your beliefs might be wrong, to be open and have the courage and dedicate the time to learning the model that will not only benefit you in this life, but eternity. Are these something to do with being virtuous? Or is it virtuous to be blindly loyal to whatever stupid opinions you grew up with and fight anyone who disagrees with you? What kind of a world is it that? Someone grows up Jewish, someone grows up Palestinian. What do? And is that oh, thank you for the follow on YouTube, Archangel. And if that's not virtue, what would be our diagnosis? A mechanic has to diagnose the cause of the problem in the car. Why is it not running? Why are the parts within the car not running harmoniously to be able to function in a higher whole? Okay, so the parts of a car have to function harmoniously, but it also has to allow there to be a car that does something, drives somewhere. That's a greater whole, greater than the parts. So when we look at humanity, are the souls working harmoniously, or is there genocide between different opinions? Is there capitalism, which has the opinions of the rich that they get to abuse everybody else and exploit their labor for profit or exploit their value? Because, I'm Elon Musk and I'm just cleverer than everyone, so I get to have all the monies, and I don't care if you can't afford a house and you have to pee into a bottle. Jeff Bezos. Are the parts acting harmoniously? No? Well, then maybe having an opinion that gets you profit isn't virtue. So we have to diagnose, not just diagnose the parts, but look to the whole. What should the parts of the car be doing as a whole? Being able to drive you to the store so you can get your groceries. Okay, that shows how boring I am. Be able to drive you to the rock concert so you can listen to Foo Fighters. Maybe not at the moment. But you know what I mean. It's got to drive you to do something. Yes. Yes, yes. Those in power who have their certain opinions that are self-serving seems to be trapped. And that's one of the questions we can take, because Meno's like that. He's rich family. He's like not only within his city, but the neighboring one. Will he stay trapped? Or is Socrates going to show something that will allow even Meno to jump out of that trap? We can get trapped in our opinions. That's a good question. Now, as we read, that's part of reading. Developing questions. How does it apply to you? How does it apply to the world? How does it apply to the questions you have about your own soul and the meaning of existence? What you should be doing here. Keep the questions, put them in a sack, wonder about them. That's part of it. Where's our question sack? That's us.
You're a wizard, Harry.
And you have an inventory and you've got questions in your inventory. So keep them. Okay, so does Meno change his mind? So let's check back in. Oh, and so we have to be able to diagnose. So we have to be able to say, okay, is there harmony within the parts of humanity? Number one. Diagnose the cause of if it is or isn't. Are they functioning together as a whole? Can you actually drive your car? The gas plug has to work with the carburetor, but it also has to be able to drive you somewhere. Otherwise, it's not functioning as a greater whole. So it is humanity functioning together for its higher purpose. So the blueprint that we're learning about how to organize souls has to also include the higher purpose, the meaning of life, the reason that humanity even exists, so that we can diagnose a broken car. It's not working. How do you know it's not working if you don't know what a car is for? If an alien came down and didn't know cars are for moving anywhere, and there was a pretty looking car, go, oh, that's a great car. But no, you have to be able to use it, function in a greater whole, drive somewhere. I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. You're an alien. So we want to know, well, what should we be doing as a whole? That's another question we can put into our inventory. If this paradigm that Socrates is talking about is the paradigm for reality, is the paradigm for understanding, allows us to diagnose problems like in Meno, like in our humanity, and not just diagnose, but prescribe a remedy, like the mechanic has to diagnose a problem and prescribe what you should do, change to unleaded fuel or whatever, or replace your oil or get a new battery. We have to diagnose what is needed for us whenever we are not in harmony within our own psyche. When are you fighting with yourself? When are you putting yourself down? When are you not doing philosophy and midwifery? Midwifery is the act of surfacing those false opinions that block us, trap us, and removing them. So when in your life, how many hours are you doing philosophical midwifery, giving birth to those negative opinions that cause you to be trapped? And discovering the true paradigm through philosophy, through reading the Balboa and organizing the parts. How do we organize the parts? That's the dialectic. That's what we were talking about. How many hours a day do you spend doing those two things? And how many hours a day doing other things? Because that might be a problem. Okay, and what should you do when you're not in harmony with yourself, putting yourself down, distracted by lesser goals, not seeking excellence of the soul, but rather seeking excellence of being a mechanic or whatever, earning money or whatever else? So diagnose the problem and prescribe a prescription. And our question, well, what's our purpose? And what's humanity's purpose? Yes, we know there's wars and there's wealth inequality, but what's the ideal we should be striving for? Well, good question. Keep it with you. Part of that model should involve us understanding the model. If the dialectic is the model or paradigm for the Logos for understanding. It's the true spiritual tradition. It's the actual full yoga that allows us to experience our soul directly and the nature of ultimate reality, and to go beyond even ultimate reality. Then part of what we should be doing here, individually and collectively, should involve learning this. So simply using the technology and resources and to collectively and efficiently and renewably meet all of our physical needs, so we have the time to be doing this, learning the paradigm and maybe experiencing it. How do you experience the dialectic? Well, that's philosophy. And by the way, experiencing the dialectic isn't just collecting together your understanding of the soul or your understanding of the virtue or understanding of beauty itself, but actually experiencing it as well. Separating from your body, from the physical world, the world of examples, pointing to things. Well, that guy does that and that guy does that. Does that mean virtue is this? Well, this guy made this quote. This guy it's a very holy looking hat. So I'm going to believe him about the soul. No. Actually experiencing it for yourself. Which is why Socrates says philosophy is the art and practice of dying. Not just dying or leaving your body, but doing something in particular while you're out of your body. One of the things Socrates says is, hey, when you're doing this dialectic, you're reading philosophy, you're pulling out the key terms and ideas, you're arranging them in a structure, that's called the dialectic. You're doing well, you're single-mindedly focused on your topic. This one here is if philosophy exists, but you could say if the virtue exists or if soul exists. Learning about the soul from the text. Okay, we'll talk about the dialectic in a second, what the actual structure is. But you're doing that, you're focused on it, single-minded focused, you're open and curious, you're in that open receptive state of mind, you're really inspired because you see how important this is. We talked about how important it is to become a mechanic, but you're becoming a mechanic of the soul. You realize that you're not just doing something theoretical, but it's actually a doorway into the experience of ultimate reality, so that's exciting. And you can maybe even use it to gain mastery of the dialectic and to benefit not your car, but your soul. So you're focused, you're interested, you're inspired, you're open, you're curious, you're thinking. You're not just thinking, you're thinking about the highest possible things. You're not thinking about Tom Cruise or cars. You're thinking about soul and reality and meaning and beauty. So you're using your highest vision. Any experiences that you've had, maybe you've played sport and you've been out of your body for a minute and you really, you did something amazing, or maybe you've done some meditation, or maybe you've done drugs, or maybe you've done dance, various different things that have given you a vision. Use it. How does this understanding relate to your highest vision? And you're using the highest words, because you're not reading a mechanic textbook, you're reading Socrates, someone who is a master of the Logos, who has experienced the different levels of reality. So, focused just by doing this. Highest vision, highest words, highest understanding, focused, curious, open-minded on one topic, the topic of the dialectic. All of these things are the conditions for meditation. Look at any meditative tradition you've ever seen in your life, any yoga, and you will find it has some collection of those things we just mentioned. The dialectic has all of them. That's why it's not just theoretical. Meditation is to separate from other things, physical senses, to join with a higher state of consciousness or being. Which is why Socrates calls this the true spiritual method. But what happens if you're doing it? Distractions. Now, some of those distractions are internal, are those opinions that we grew up with that are fighting to save themselves. That's why on this channel we have philosophical midwifery, which is the application of this dialectic to surface those false opinions that we don't even know we had that limit us and distract us, tell us to give up, tell us we're not good enough, tell us that reality isn't knowable, or reality isn't understandable, or reality doesn't care about you. Diminishes reality or diminishes you. That's the pathologos. So we have to be doing this as well. Okay? But some of the distractions are physical ones. You need to go to the toilet. You need to eat some food. Your back is sore. The same sorts of things that happen when you're sitting on a mat in formal meditation. So what? Well, if your dialectic serves its higher function, so here you are putting the parts of your psyche together. Focused attention, you have an attention as a psyche. Open, curious mind, yeah, that's the highest part of your openness. You're not closed-minded and prejudiced and bigoted. No, you're open. You are inspired. You're not bored. You're inspired because this is so important. So in other words, you're using the highest aspects of your soul and you're putting them together into a whole because all of them are needed to do this. Just like the highest parts of a car when you're working for McLaren is the Formula One race cars. The best carburetors, the best engines, the best gas plugs. I don't know how important a gas plug is, but you use the best things to put it together to do one task, win the Formula One. So that's the best parts for the function. What's the function of the dialectic? Well, we just said to separate the soul from the body. So what? Well, if you're out of the body, you may still have certain counterattacks or distractions that come up from those false beliefs that are not physical, like you're not good enough. Remember when you were really excited and open and curious when you were a kid, and then dad came along and said, "You're a dumb kid." Or "Don't be excited about cooking, that's woman's work." And you thought, Jesus, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my excitement. Or I can't do what I really want to do. That's not physical. Those things can still come in to distract you. That's why we do philosophical midwifery. Check it out on the YouTube channel. But physical distractions, needing to eat stuff, getting a sore back, needing to go to the toilet, those things are less likely to come up when you're out of your body. So one of the questions we have in the photo is, what do we do once we're out of the body? Because Socrates is saying that's not the end. In fact, he says that's kind of where it starts. Because it's much easier to do philosophy out of the body. What's the practice of philosophy? This guy here. So all of those things we can, just those things we've just been talking about, pull out the key terms, pull out the highest things, pull out the things that resonate. Organize them together into your own understanding. That's this part. You're understanding, you're going through the activity of understanding the paradigm of understanding. And don't believe this guy. This isn't me talking, it's Socrates. But don't even believe Socrates. Socrates was very clear in the Phaedo. Don't believe what I'm saying, you idiots. That's going to be terrible. Because then someone else is going to come up with a different belief that sounds closer to what you brought up with, and then suddenly you'll believe that. Don't stay at the level of belief. Understand. Now, understanding you also prove in your experience. So do it. All the time. Practice the dialectic. Master it. And it will allow you to experience higher aspects of reality, and you can also use it as an art to benefit yourself and others. That's where we are in the text. We're learning the paradigm. And all of this is a revision of why it's important. So before we go further, let's do a quick recap of the dialectic. But I'm just conscious that I've been ignoring chat for a little bit. So let's check in with all the chat messages. Thanks for your patience, chatters. And I appreciate your questions. Let's check in and just go back. Right. Des and Globestar are talking about what's objectively true. Is 1 true? Is 1 + 1 true? Good questions. I'm glad that you guys are talking about that. Is this what Terrence Howard is going nuts on? I don't know who Terrence Howard is. But is he going nuts? I don't know. Oh no, I know that guy. Yeah, he was nuts. Yeah, so the Terrence Howard is a guy that was a meme about a month ago because he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was trying to what was he doing? He seemed to be trying to communicate an insight that he had from a vision he had that may or may not have been real. It may have been real. He was trying to communicate it in the language he had without an understanding of the paradigm. In other words, if you have a dream about a race car that can race faster than all of the other race cars, or a spaceship that can fly without having to use the way that planes fly, now that might be an insight. But if you lack the understanding of the parts and how they fit together, what's that called? The paradigm. You might not be able to communicate that vision. And you said, oh, I know how you can make spaceships. Oh, how? Ooh. Magic? People will say you're crazy. Now, if you have a misunderstanding of the paradigm, you might try and say, oh, it's kind of like, you know how we think 1 and 1 is 2, but there's another way of looking at it that 1 and 1 isn't 2. No, you're misusing the paradigm. Now, there might be a way in which 1 and 1 is more than 2 under certain non-Euclidean systems. Like a non-Euclidean means like, normally, let's just draw it on the board. If you can say, you know, if you have a point and another point, and you can join them by a straight line, that's simple, straight line. But if you are talking about being on the surface of the planet, which is round, then you can have a point here, a point here, and a point here, and even though it's joined by a straight line, it actually turns out to be curved. Because you're not doing it on a flat surface, you're doing it on a curved surface. Now, in, you know, quantum physics and the highest exploration of like non-Euclidean math and black holes and how planets affect gravity in space-time, this is what they're dealing with. Sure. But Terrence Howard doesn't know math or science, so he struggles to communicate his vision. And he also comes to incorrect conclusions about his vision. Now, how does this apply to philosophy? Many people have had various out-of-body experiences. So their soul has separated from their body and they're in wonder. Now, the soul has got one eye. So they're like in wonder. But if they don't have the paradigm to understand what they are experiencing, they might have a bad time, a bad trip, we call it. And also when they come back into their body, draw that on the board, come back into their body, they experience something very profound. Absolutely it was. But when they try and talk about it, they're all confused. What's happened to my board? My board's frozen. Why is my board frozen? That's weird. Okay, this is one of the interesting things about spirituality. People have had an out-of-body experience or whatever, but if they don't have they don't have an understanding of it, they're either going to have a bad trip, their way that they communicate it will be flawed, or they'll misunderstand it. Oh, I experienced the face of Mother Mary, Virgin Mother of God, of Jesus. No, that's not what you experienced. You might be using a language you're familiar with to try and make sense of it, but that's the significance of the logos. Learning the paradigm gives you what you need to make sense of it, navigate, and journey. Just because you're out of the body doesn't mean you've experienced every level of reality. Keep going. Or as we've been talking about, do more philosophy, only without the distractions of your physical body. But we can also say benefit. You can benefit. How does that relate to something physical? Let's use an analogy to explain this. Let's say you go to a football game, an American football game. You've never seen it before. You don't have a language. You don't know what a tackle is. You don't know what a down is. You don't know what a touchdown is. You don't know what offside is. You experience it. You might be very traumatized because it looks like a bunch of really, really big super athletes beating the heck out of each other. That could be very scary. A bad trip. Also, you won't know who's winning. You won't know when to go and get your nacho chips. You won't know when it's halftime or something. If you don't understand that there is such a thing as halftime. Someone gets tackled and it's a first down. Think, oh, it's time to get my nachos. You're navigating yourself wrong. It's not nacho time. It's only first down time. They're going to have a little cuddle or huddle. It's called cuddles, and football are called huddles. They have a huddle for a minute or so, and then they're going to do another play. All right. Also, you won't be able to benefit from it. You won't be able to become a better footballer player yourself even if you're seeing Joe Namath or Tom Brady. If you don't know what a pass is or what a quarterback is, how can you benefit from having this experience, even if it's a Super Bowl, even if it's the best possible experience of football? Tom Brady at the Super Bowl, the best player in the best game. You won't benefit at all. Or you might come away with really crazy conclusions. Because you don't have an understanding of the paradigm. So this is the difference between traditional spirituality, who's interested in the experience, and philosophy. We use the development of the paradigm in philosophy, says Socrates, as our method to experience, not the highest experience of football, the highest experience of reality and self. The highest experience of consciousness, reality, and self. Through all of these things, you can apply analogically to philosophy as a spiritual tradition. Now, equally, you could say the same thing about Western philosophy, or the way Meno thinks of philosophy. So it's not the experience without the paradigm, it's a paradigm without the experience. You go to college, you learn about philosophy, you learn all these different opinions. Now, technically, they don't actually give you a paradigm, they just give you a bunch of opinions so you can make up your own paradigm and then become a psychotherapist or become a philosopher or whatever you want to be with your own opinion cobbled together. So they don't even give you the understanding, technically, but they claim to just give you the understanding. But what good is understanding what a quarterback is and what a Super Bowl is and what a tackle is without actually going to ever watch a football game? Can you imagine that? Being an expert at the understanding of football but never seeing a game? That's also crazy, but in the other way. That's why it's not theoretical. It's not just the paradigm. You have to verify it in your experience, and it's entirely possible to do so. Not only is it possible, it's important that you do so, and Socrates is saying that's the whole reason you're here. So it's possible, important, it's your purpose, but if you don't do this, you will have negative experiences in your life because you're operating without a paradigm. You're thinking in a crappy way. Imagine going to the Olympics and you haven't learned how to sprint. Your technique is bad. Now, we are all sprinters. We are all alive as human souls right now. We're all thinking. Everything we do involves our thinking. We have to plan. We have to have an idea of what's most good. What am I going to do today? What's going to be my highest good? So we have a vision of what is our highest benefit, whether we like it or not, just by being alive. And then we have to pick which is the best vision, the highest good or benefit. Now, in philosophy, the experience of being is experiencing the good, not a good, but the good, the ideal. So, if you were to pick the best thing to do, it's philosophy. But a lot of people don't know that for the reasons we are talking about, but we are reawakening philosophy. That's the whole point of the channel. So, but the point is, we're doing this anyway. We have a vision of what we think that is good, and as human beings, we have a system of understanding, what we're calling here a paradigm, that we use to think. How should I do it? Should I do it tomorrow? Should I do it on a full stomach? Should I go to this place or that place? Should I go early? Should I tell my friends about it, or should I keep it secret? Whatever it is that you do. You have a vision and you have a paradigm to reach it. So you could say, roughly speaking, the way that philosophy talks about is just the theory, without really a paradigm, but it's just the thinking, and it's no experience. And, you know, the spiritual traditions we see around us at this point of history, Buddhism and Taoism and all that, have the experience, but without the paradigm. And even without the paradigm of how to get to the experience isn't guaranteed. You could spend 40 years meditating at the ashram and never have an enlightenment experience, never be able to separate from your body. That happens more often than not. It's like rolling the dice. I'm going to fix this car. I have no idea what the ideal car is. I have no idea how to do it. Every now and again, you might hit upon something, but it's going to be 1 in a million. That's our society right now. We don't have an understanding and an experience of the ideal, and we don't have a paradigm of how to reach it. That's why philosophy is so important, and Socrates is making that case to us right now. That's where we are in the text, learning the paradigm. So, and that's why I have this channel. We actually have the text with the actual Greek. You can see it there. These. We actually have the text to gain the material. We actually, so we can actually read all this. This isn't me, this is just Socrates. So we can reawaken our intellectual tradition and our spiritual tradition. And by the way, if you understand the paradigm and you can verify it in your own experience for yourself, do you have to believe anyone? What if they have a big funny hat? Or what if they wear robes and they have all these other people praying to them? Say, oh, you're the best, whatever. Do you have to believe them when you understand and experience it yourself? All right, let's go back to the chat. That's Terrence Howard. So Terrence Howard is an example of what would happen if you don't have the paradigm as well as the vision. Back to the chat. Sorry again for being a bit behind in the chat. Background music, yes, we did that. Fun thing, turn the music down. I hope the music's not doing all right. I got a compressor on the loud is quiet and the quiet is... Oh, okay, so maybe I should add a compressor to my music. Let's do that really quickly now. Add a compressor. Let's turn the ratio to 5. Turn it up a little bit so I can hear it. So back to the chat. Sorry, I stopped I stopped my recording for a second. The question was, what are we going to be doing while we're here? Everything we do is seeking what we think is good. Even as children, we think eating ice cream is good until we learn more about a higher idea of goodness. We know this. So we want to go from the many good things like good food, good music, good friends, to what is the good itself, the model or the paradigm of the good. We do that anyway. So we're all philosophers anyway. It's just how conscious do you want to be? Or how much of a slave do you want to be to the ignorance of your ancestors, your family, great-grandparents, and so on and so on? Or the opinions of your culture, the ignorance of your culture. In other words, you're in the game. Philosophy is learning how to play it well, which involves figuring out what the good is. So and also, how do we reach the good? You have to develop an understanding of how to reach there. But not just how to reach the good, but even in conversations with your friends. If you're talking about something and they're all over the place like an ADHD squirrel, they talk about a definition, then they talk about its effects, and they talk about its consequence. Like, whoa, can you just think properly with me? That's the dialectic, the model of even thinking. Now, obviously, we don't just want to use it as a paradigm to gossip. We want to use it to reach the good. So whatever life's about, it's definitely going to involve those two things. And what's wild is, if we apply the paradigm of thinking, the dialectic, to the good or beauty or all of the things that exist in the realm of being that our soul can experience, that's philosophy. That's what real philosophy is. So if you're doing philosophy and you're not looking at the realm of being, that's not philosophy. Says Socrates. That's love of opinions. You're in the physical world. The physical world, you can just see many things, examples, adjectives, a beautiful dog, a beautiful person, but you're not seeing beauty itself. For there to be a beautiful dog and a beautiful person, beauty has to exist. Even if the physical examples are rubbish, you've never seen a beautiful dog because you hate dogs, you still have the idea of beauty. Where'd you get that from? You haven't seen beauty itself as an idea wandering around, so where did you get it from? Your soul must have known it. So you can say, philosophy is also remembering. That's the Phaedo, by the way. We got a channel, we got a series on the Phaedo in YouTube if you want to check it out. And that's where we are in the text. We're learning the paradigm. So, good question. Right. What's the... good question. Here's a question in chat. For the soul to even exist in the first place, so soul, one way of understanding soul is our consciousness that's tied to a particular body. So we are ensouled, you could say. If the mind was mind itself or consciousness itself, what's the point of it even generating the physical world? This is our physical world. This is being. If this is being or mind, if that's the creator or the demiurgos, creator God, intelligence that's creating and sustaining each moment of our physical experience, why do that? Why wasn't this enough? And why go here just to learn this, to reach this, which was where we started? What's the point of going through a not knowing and a wondering and being puzzled and having problems only to learn the paradigm for how to solve problems and how to remember the truth and how to go back to where we started again? What's the point of doing all that if we're going back to where we started from? Good question. Put it in your question sack. Hold on to it. Nurture it. Polish it up like a gem. Ask your friends. See if any answers are sufficient. And if they're not sufficient, be genuine. Say, that doesn't answer my question. Good. Keep it. That's part of the dialectic. You gotta have a question. Now, one thing to think about is, so if we're looking at journeys or movement through time, there's something we can look at called the hero's journey. A friend of Pierre Grimes, who wrote the philosophical midwifery book, Joseph Campbell. He studied different mythological traditions and saw there was a kind of standard archetype or paradigm. Now, he didn't actually see the paradigm because the paradigm itself has to be eternal. If the paradigm is eternal, it has to exist in this realm of the good that the soul experiences. So he didn't see the paradigm, but he created a kind of model by looking at the physical examples. So this is kind of as close to philosophy as you can get without actually realizing you're supposed to experience the model itself. So he was looking at the physical examples of hero's journey in different cultures and mythological traditions. This is Joseph Campbell. He worked, and then he figured out that there are stages of a journey that a main character in a story goes through called the hero's journey. And he worked very closely with George Lucas, who made the Star Wars series that was very popular, and it still is. But you can see the same thing with like Harry Potter, you name it. You name it. It seems like there are, and if you ever do screenwriting or you write for movies and stuff, they read his books. Hero of a Thousand Faces and A Hero's Journey, which is a paradigm that he created based on the many examples. And what's interesting is you start at home, you go on a journey, you get confused, you get challenged, there's a dragon in part of it, there's a wizard calling you to cross the threshold and go into this new world. Just like philosophy. Socrates is our call to action or call to adventure. There is a whole different world called the realm of being. Your adventure is to get from our physical world to this realm. That's philosophy, and live in this world. Learn the dialectic. The dialectic isn't used to, gossip about Brad Pitt. It's used so your soul can reach a higher level of existence. Being itself. Good itself. Justice itself. Virtue itself. So that's a call to adventure. And then there are stages, and you're confused, and you're puzzles, and there are ups and downs, and there are problems, and the hero almost gives up and all that, but then he wins, and then he goes back home. Why? If you go back to where you started from, what's the point of going on this adventure to begin with? Same question you asked, Hassan, in chat. And if there is a reason, can we experience it as a paradigm? When Joseph Campbell met Pierre Grimes, who was a master of Platonic philosophy, and he applied this same dialectic not to being, as we are learning here, but to our problems, our false beliefs that block us from doing philosophy, he said, hey, Joseph, you want to get into philosophy and learn the real paradigm? Or do you want to read the symposium? Do you want to start reading Socrates to get the material that you can use to actually get to the real paradigm? Or are you happy just using your physical senses and just guessing? And he said, oh, what's the time? I've got to go. Run. He didn't want to get into the symposium. But we're going to get into the symposium on this channel here. So great news for us.
Wow.
So hopefully, Hassan, I haven't answered your question. I've just given you more material so you can make a bigger, brighter, shinier question. Good question. Thanks for sharing. And by the way, when you share it, here's a question. What happened? In philosophy, you weren't knocked down because you didn't know the answer. You weren't made fun of because I didn't know the answer. I'm happy to not know the answer. It also brought back into my state of mind this question too that I've also had. This is a big one for me too. Everyone listening, maybe they've wondered about it too. If the whole point is to know the self, says Socrates, but I am the self. What's the point of, why do we forget? Why do we suffer? Why do we have problems? If the goal is where we started from. So in other words, we all benefit from you sharing questions. And every text, you'll be able to add more to that question. That's the game. We all benefit together. It's not us versus them, which is what happens when you're in the realm of the physical or the realm of opinions. What is this seeing, hearing, and knowing this as a whole? Good question. This is just looking at the world through the perspective of the book that you've been reading. You're right. That's what people who think there is no truth would say. It's important to realize. So if we were doing a dialectic about philosophy, and all of the things we've talked about today, you, watcher, fellow adventurer, have to organize in this way if you want to play the game. If you want to just sit back and say, I know everything because my dad was smarter than Socrates and I got all my opinions from him, then just shut up, then I hope you enjoy it, but I hope you enjoy this channel, but you're not in the game of philosophy. You're going to miss everything. And it's going to affect your incarnations and so on and so on. And if you ever have kids, you'll pass on that ignorance to them and so on. So keep an open mind. But so when we do it, so all of these things put into here, put into a dialectic of what philosophy is, if it exists. In other words, exists eternally as a paradigm and a being or a selfer. It has a selfhood. And necessarily has to be. If gravity is everywhere, gravity isn't a physical thing. It has to have an existence. For there to be physical things or examples or adjectives, there has to be, before the physical world, somewhere where those principles came from. That's the realm of being. And it's also knowable or experienceable. Okay, so all of this stuff put into what happens if philosophy exists. And by exists, we mean just that, eternally immortal. So you can do a dialectic if existence exists. That's an important one too, because we're using the word exists in every dialectic. Now, that's not enough. You have to do side B. What if it doesn't exist? Now let's look at the categories. Again, we've got two terms, self and other. Definition is self itself. What can you say about the subject itself? If you were to describe a car, what would you say about the car itself? That's definition. Now, how does this self you've just described function to another? So you got to pick the other. So you can do many dialectics on cars, just have different others. How does a car relate to a car owner? That's demonstration. How does it function? This car takes me as an owner to the shop to get my bananas, if you like bananas. All right? Now, you've defined how it functions to you. Then how do you, being a car owner, having been affected by the car, you'd be a different person if you didn't have a car. You couldn't get your bananas so easily. How do you then relate to others? Maybe you give your friends a lift to the banana store. You go to a car show because you love your car so much, you want to show it off. Gets you, you give your workmates, you carpool to work in the morning, and you develop a better relationship with your co-workers because you carpool in the morning. Okay? Now, after you have all of these consequences, yourself and the others, how can you unify that into a single other? That's called synthesis. How can you synthesize? Is from all of what you've seen, can you find something common? Something that brings it together as a whole? Or does one idea stand out as the highest? We talked about the logos being the highest or the capping stone. Did you come to a new insight or see something high or causal or primary or unifies it all? That's synthesis. And now the next part is you take this synthesis and you bring it back to the start. So this self here is the self way back at the start. That's analysis. So now that you've done all of this work, you go back to home again.
Wow.
So this exploration of the dialectic, Hassan, you can use to your question, what's the point of being an ensouled body if we came from mind? Wasn't mind itself or consciousness itself good enough? Why do we go through this journey in life only to return home to where we started from? Good question. Maybe your understanding of the paradigm of the dialectic can add to your question. Because here, we start with this thing, Then we improve it with this definition. Then we see how it functions to another person. Then we take that other person and divide it up to others. And from all of this, we unify it together that we then use to take back to understand this original self even better. So now we have a better understanding of a car from having gone through all this. Was it worth it? Now, what happens now is we've gone back to the start, but we have improved in some way. Harry Potter goes back home at the end of his magical journey, or Luke Skywalker goes back to his friends at the end, but now he's a Jedi. But he has gained something. What have we gained? Well, one thing we've gained is a better understanding of a car. What does that mean? That means we have what we need to do another dialectic.
Wow. I want to eat a monkey.
So we do it again. Isn't that cool? So what's happening? We are going out, returning, but when we return, we're higher. Then we do it again. We're spiraling upwards. Learning, growing, evolving. Now think about that. Now, if you have a friend that you meet for coffee, you might have similar conversations. You're both into philosophy. So what? Won't you get bored? Of course not, because you're always learning new things. You might be using the same dialectic to structure your thinking and have the best kinds of conversations, but you can always improve. Think about the conversations you've had with friends you've had for a long time. As you evolve, as you mature, you still have conversations. Now, there are some friends that you can't do that because they're dopes, or they're closed-minded, or they're bigoted. They never learn. So that would be in this category. What happens if you don't have philosophy? You don't go through this. They don't spiral upwards. They end up with every conversation takes them back to what they already believed in. Now, I think it's very funny because these people often call themselves realists, which is hilarious because what they're really saying is, I agree with all of my own dumb opinions. Yeah, no doy. Of course you do. They're your opinions. Philosophy is freeing us from being stuck or stagnant so that we can go through this to evolve and learn new things, have better relationships. So these are the friends that you leave behind because they're closed-minded bigots. Now you leave your hometown and you find people that you can learn and grow from. That's the difference. So what? Well, so if that's philosophy, what we've just been talking about, that's the dialectic, leading to being, which is existence. We also have to explore what happens if philosophy doesn't exist. So what we said about this bigoted friend that you lose your clever friends, you lose your philosophy friends, that would be a consequence or a conclusion of this dialectic. Why? Well, anything you say, they'll say, that's just your perspective. So let's say you've been in this channel for a long time and you've been learning about the meaning of life. Say, oh, I've learned about the meaning of life. They'll say, no, that's just your opinion. That's just your perspective. Everyone's perspective is just as true as everyone else's. Now, you might try and have a conversation using the dialectic and say, hey, by the way, you know your racist Uncle Joe? Yeah. Is his perspective just as valuable as yours? No, of course not. Oh, so not everything is the same. Not everything is equal. Some opinions are stupid. Some perspectives are wrong. Of course there is. That's why we go to school. Before I became an engineer, I thought that bridges were built because of this, but then I had to drop my false beliefs about how bridges are made and actually spend 5 to 10 years learning how to actually make bridges. Of course, perspective doesn't mean it's right. Oh, wait a minute. Is there a truth to how bridges have to be made? Of course there is. Otherwise, bridges would be collapsing all over the place. Everyone would be being sued or murdered. Oh, so it's not a matter of perspective. Of course not. So there is a truth. Of course there is. Now, can we apply it to our soul? That's philosophy. So, if philosophy doesn't exist, we would say it's opinion or relative. Relative to what? Our perspective. That's self itself, philosophy itself. How would you define philosophy if it didn't exist? That's modernism, sometimes called Aristotelianism or Stoicism. Because Socrates is saying that's the opposite. That's Meno. But after Socrates, there was Plato. After Plato, there was Aristotle. And Aristotle influenced the Romans, who killed these guys and took over. That's our tradition. That's our history, whether we like it or not, in the West. They didn't have a word for the, so they could never ask the questions that we ask in philosophy. They had a language that prevented them from doing philosophy, because we can talk about a beautiful dog, a beautiful person, a beautiful painting, but philosophy is taking the many and going to the ideal. The. What's the noun? Not the adjectives that you see with your senses. And that's been the Meno. Meno can only describe things he's seen with his senses. Socrates made fun of him and say, hey, it's like when somebody at a party drops a glass and they say, you've made a many out of a one. That's you, Meno. You can't come to a definition. You can't come to understanding because you don't know how to go from the many, the A's, to a one. Now, we also have that same problem. So the Meno is very, very important for us to learn right now in 2024. Don't want to date myself. Whenever you're watching it now, I guarantee it's important. Now, historically, the reason why this anti-philosophy is taught as philosophy in our modern education system is one of the reasons is the Romans, the Latin, the church. And they didn't have a word for the. So how could they look for the beauty? Right? So that's our historical context for that. So if philosophy didn't exist like the way it's taught, we would say it's just a matter of perspective. Now, how would that person function to another person? So how does philosophy function to you? That's so self to itself, it's just an opinion. Self to other, what would you say? If philosophy is just an opinion, how does it affect you? It's boring. It's annoying. It's a waste of time. Or I want to learn it so I can make my opinions sound clever and trick people. Become a grifter. Or become a teacher or something. Like Gorgias. Okay, and then how would you relate to your friends? If this is you having been affected, demonstration, by this idea of philosophy that doesn't exist, how would you relate to your friends? Every time they'd have a new insight, you would say, that's just your opinion. And like, well, it's more than an opinion. No, it's just your opinion. And you know what? My opinion. Well, isn't that your opinion when you say that it's my opinion? So what makes your opinion right? Well, because I can quote Kant and Hegel. And they sound like this.
Have you read Brand at all? Have you read Nagel? What about Scanlon? Have you read Scanlon or Scruton or Edmund Burke? Have you read C.S. Lewis? Have you read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Have you read Immanuel Kant? So you know Pflicht.
What has this got to do with Bob's Burgers?
Do you practice self-love in a Kantian sense? Do you masturbate to Kant? Have you seen Infinity Wars? Have you even seen Age of Ultron?
So that's how you would sound to your friends. This is you, the other here, to other others. So you would sound just like that audio clip. And then as a result, how would they relate back to philosophy? Or how would you relate back to philosophy? You'd hate it because you'd lose all your friends, because who wants to talk to that kind of joker? Everything that's beneficial, that's just your opinion. Everything, every genuine experience of self-reality. No, you're just on drugs. You're just tricking yourself. Well, don't you want to learn? Where did you get your opinions from? My dad, and he knew everything. What? Do you see how crazy that is? Your next door neighbor. Do you think their dad knows everything? No. Then why do you think your one does? Do you have a kind of false loyalty or irrational, immature loyalty to the opinions you grew up with? If so, we call that being closed-minded. That's a conclusion. Or the synthesis. You end up closed-minded, and the analysis, what does that happen? What happens to you as a result? People hate philosophy, or people dismiss philosophy, or no one actually picks up the most important, fun, meaningful game, philosophy. And because whenever you talk about philosophy, you lose all your friends. So you have to do both. All right? It's a good question though. And by the way, this is new. We've only had a translation of Socrates for the last 5 to 10 years. It's very rare to learn philosophy the correct way. So I don't expect almost anyone listening to have this perspective, let's say. The perspective that takes you beyond perspective. So a good book that I recommend, if this is interesting and curious to you, is It All Relative? Is It All Relative by Dr. Pierre Grimes. It's fantastic. Check it out. Back to the chat. Okay, Des talking about his experience snapping back to the body. That's important too. Sometimes people have a fear when they're doing the dialectic and they're starting to leave their body. They feel, what if I don't come back? And that could be a block that limits them. And as Des talking about in chat, you snap back. Which is interesting because one of the fears we have is a fear of death. It's one of the biggest fears. And if we're literally dying, oh no, this is the worst, scariest thing, I'm dying. Don't worry. It's not your last death. They're not burying you. This is part of waking up to philosophy, to living well. So that's the tragedy, that some people limit themselves by their false beliefs about death. They haven't gone through philosophical midwifery to purify themselves of this, because if philosophy doesn't exist, or if the soul doesn't exist, then death is the end. It's the worst, scariest thing. Or maybe they have other opinions when you could die and go to hell and be tortured for all eternity. These kind of bullshit fairy tales that we use to terrify children so they can be give up their love and wonder of understanding and self and reality, so they can be abused and manipulated. The idea of hell. So we have to go through the philosophical midwifery to get rid of the unsuspected false beliefs that will limit us, specifically our false beliefs about death. And it's tragic, of course, when you say it out loud, and it's wrong and unjust and needs to be addressed, but also comedical in a certain kind of way, that your fear of death that prevents you from experiencing the higher levels of self and reality, that it's the irony is, once you do get there, quite often people say, if I had a choice to stay in these higher dimensions or go back to this dream world, in comparison to that is less interesting, less fun, less real, I would definitely choose to stay dead. So that's the irony. But you don't. You snap back. Because this is part of learning. Because it's not just the experience, as we talked about today. If you just have the experience of the football game, that's not good enough. You have to reflect on it. Say, hey, what did you see? So we need the experience and the understanding. The experience itself isn't understanding. So you snap back to your body so you can understand it. In fact, that experience is what gets people into philosophy, about half of them. Some people love understanding. They see the benefit of reason and good conversation. Maybe they come across someone like Pierre Grimes, or they come across a Balboa translation of Socrates, and they realize, holy shit, this is where it's at. These are finally someone who's thinking clearly and doesn't reject everything they don't like with the idea, oh, it's just your opinion, or that's just your perspective. Finally, someone isn't closed-minded and bigoted. Finally, someone can think in a way where we can address our problems, finally. All these problems that are obvious that aren't being addressed. Fascism, capitalism, exploitation, profiteering, war. They're stupid, and we can understand them if we learn to understand. The same way we understand how to fix our computer. We don't have to go to a war with someone. We understand how to fix a broken toaster. We don't have to exploit toaster makers to fix our toaster. Finally, someone like Dr. Pierre Grimes or Socrates, in a Balboa translation, is applying this rational understanding to what's most meaningful, more meaningful even than toasters. The soul, the meaning of life, what our self is, what created everything. What is the highest reach of reality and mind and consciousness? What is actually beneficial? So some people are inspired by that and get them into philosophy. What's the ideal of the paradigm that will lead them into the experience? Some people come the other way. They've had an experience, as Des is talking about, and then they snap back into their body and like, what the heck was that? That was more real than anything I've experienced through my senses. Of course, your senses, it's so many steps removed. And then you try and talk to it about people, but they haven't had this experience and they don't have this understanding. I've been to lots of pubs and I hardly hear people talking about this at all. And then they come across again Dr. Pierre Grimes or Socrates in a Balboa translation, and they're only talking about this. And they happen to have the best of this too. They're the only people who can make sense of this spiritual experience. And there are many spiritual traditions that lack a logos, that lack a proper, complete, full paradigm and understanding. So even spiritual Eastern traditions or whatever, not satisfactory, not explaining it. They use mysterious terms or they're indirect or because they don't understand. Because their system isn't based on the logos and dialectic. It's that simple. So simple. So some people have this experience that gets them into learning that. Some people it's vice versa. So that's the irony of people who are afraid of being dead because of their false beliefs, but then they realize, no, you're forced to not be dead. You're forced to come back into your body. So that fear it's the opposite. And once you're out of the body, it's like, I remember when I was a little kid and I'd be playing with my Legos or something. And my parents would say, all right, time for a shower. It's almost bedtime. I'd be like, no, I don't want to go for a shower. I'm enjoying my Legos so much. I never want to have a shower. When I'm old, I'll never have a shower. I'll make it a rule. No showers ever. So I can play Legos forever. And there'd be a big battle that would last for like 20 minutes. Finally, I'd have to have a shower. Once I'm in the shower, they'd be like, all right, you've been in the shower for 15 minutes. It's time to get out. No, never. I wouldn't want to. The shower is so warm and cozy. Oh, it's so lovely in here. I would rather stay in here. When I'm old, I'll make it a rule never to leave the shower. Oh, it'd be so great. I still kind of think that. I wish I was rich enough to avoid an eternal shower or to afford the electricity bills to have longer showers, but that's the irony. So you would laugh at a little kid making that argument to never have a shower because they love their Lego. That's a similar sort of thing that can prevent people into having the experience of reality or separating the soul, true philosophy. Oh, I don't want to be dead. But then once you get there, it's like, oh, of course, this is far more real. But then get out of the shower, go back to your body, make sense of that experience, use this as a model of the ideal that you use in your dialectic, make sense of the parts and see how you can break them down into a dialectic to gain understanding and mastery. Use both together to function with an art, benefit yourself and your friends, contribute to the progress of humanity. And you're like, no, but it's so warm and cozy here. So that's the irony. But good point. Okay. Yes, so numbers are non-physical objects. True. Abstract. Okay, so there's two ideas, Hassan, I don't know if you're still there in chat. There are two ideas that are being mixed together. So, in philosophy, you could say that There are certain eternal ideas like beauty and maybe even one and two that exist. Therefore, they're understandable and experienceable. So we don't really have a word for that in English, but the understanding of the realm of being is called dianoia. The experience of it's called nous or noesis. So that's the first thing that you said. But then you introduced a word from over here, abstract. So people who think there is no existence will say, oh, it's an abstraction. Its abstraction means less real than the physical things. So I see one coffee mug. If I was in this camp, I would believe that the idea of one is less real than this coffee mug. Look, I can do this. I can physically tap it with my physical pen that makes a physical sound. I can't physically tap one. I can't hear one. So therefore, one is less real. Now, that's a bit funny because you're applying physical standards for something beyond the physical. And of course, as we evolve, you can have things, but what makes humans in our part of history more evolved than caveman humans is we can count things. We can see, oh, there were 4 sheep today, but there were 5 sheep yesterday. Maybe there's a wolf around the cave. So as we grow and get more intelligent and rational, we go to what is not abstract or less real, but what is more real. Because even when this physical cup is gone, one will still exist. Even when this planet is gone, one will still exist. Even in 1 billion years, in 1 billion light years away, an alien species could realize, oh, one globloid. Globloids are what aliens call coffee mugs in the future. But it's one globloid. So 2 ideas in there. One is the non-physical things are less real or abstractions. And one is that they're non-physical and therefore metaphysical or more primary and causal and have an existence that's knowable in nous. But again, if you were raised like Meno in a culture that wants you to be physical slaves and seek physical things because they control all the physical things, I own all the monies, I own all the groceries, I own all the houses, fucked up capitalism bullshit. Sorry to swear, but Jesus Christ, can we get over this capitalism shit? So therefore, only seek physical things because I own it all. Yes, with my lovely monopolies. Therefore, I can manipulate people and get the famous and P. Diddy in the meme at the moment. I have the access to all of the physical things you want, and I have all the monies. So therefore, anything non-physical is less real. Don't seek that. Chase the American dream, the capitalist dream. Right? If you grow up in that culture, you will reject everything that isn't what they value, like Meno, a rich boy. So, important to recognize the difference between what they say and what Socrates is saying. Right, defining things objectively, not subjectively. That's right. And it's hard to do when you're in your physical body, like defining blue. Absolutely. That's why we do philosophy. Soul is, no, the opposite. So soul is an idea. The word eidos we use. Eidos isn't idea. Now, the poor translations of philosophy that try and define this in here will say these things that we think of as ideas are concepts. But that's not what Socrates is saying, and not what we can understand and verify. The word eidos, A-I-D-O-S, this is often translated as idea. That's called anglicized, translated into a word in Anglo-Saxon that sounds similar but is the opposite meaning, idea, which for us means concept or abstraction. But that's a mistranslation. If you actually get into the Balboa, like we do in this channel, this is hilariously wrong. Because every time he says eidos, he's talking about being and being, or being out of the body, or reality. These are the aspects of being. Now, the fact that this is so central to the dialectic, because our dialectic has to be about this. Because eidos are the aspects of what exist. The dialectic is to be on this. And if philosophy is the study and the practice of the dialectic, then anything that translates eidos as idea or concept or abstraction is insanely wrong. It's like you're castrating yourself, or you're hamstringing yourself. You're shooting yourself in the foot. And nothing would make sense. It's like you're reading Harry Potter and then you start to use it as a manual to fix your car. Nothing in Harry Potter is about how to fix your car at all. Nothing in Socrates says the eidos are concepts or ideas at all. He's saying the exact opposite. So it's hilarious. And this is called the great betrayal. One of the great betrayals against philosophy is that the way it's taught and the way it's mistranslated is in this hilariously ridiculous way. So the soul is an eidos, an aspect of being. Beauty, justice, virtue, which is the subject of the text, is one of the aspects of being. It's not an abstraction or a concept. Now, that idea that it's not real and it's just an opinion serves the rich, powerful people who can use violence to justify their opinion or manipulation. This is attractive, so they'll pay money to academics to say, oh, there's no truth. Good. So I can use my weapons and monies and manipulations and whatever to control people, so I can do what I think is good until I die, while harming my soul and harming those people around me. And I'm going to not only live badly, but die badly. So we want to get out of that game. But good point, good question. So I'm just catching up with the chat. Yes, good example, using color in the example in the Meno to explain the difference from physical things and ideas. We looked at color and shape. So color and shape was in the Meno. So good questions. Check out the previous podcasts that we've done on this one, because color and shape are good examples to learn the difference between being and reality and eidos and our physical senses. And also to learn how to use the dialectic. And also to see the difference between Socrates and Meno, because when Socrates was using the dialectic to explain physical things, Meno said, oh yeah, I like that. When you said color is something we can see with our senses, yeah, I like that. And Socrates says, that's theatrically tragic, what you just said. Because the other dialectic on the ideas that actually exist, that's what we're after. That's where you get the actual definitions. That's where we find virtue. So in the text, he said, so here we are. So he talks about shapes here in being. And then he talks about how there is a flow from the real beings, passages that allow us to perceive it with our physical senses, like sight and vision. And then he defines color. Therefore, color is the flow from shapes in being that is symmetrical and therefore perceptible to our sight. So color is kind of a transition between physical senses and the realm of being. And Meno said, oh, that's the best answer you've given so far. Which is funny for us. But he said, but it's also theatrically tragic, Meno, that you think this way. So all of the problems he's had being unable to give a definition of virtue only point to physical examples or opinions or perspectives is tragic. It's not learning, it's not understanding, it's not philosophy, and you can't get a single definition. So that's what. So we can see why it's tragic. Meno, I bet it goes over Meno's head. But then he goes on to say, "Hey, you know how we were talking about how let's just get rid of this guy here. Scrub. So we're talking about how people get into philosophy either from the experience or the understanding, and we need both. Here we go. We can call this what color? This color. What color? This separation we can call a spiritual, because it's the spirit, initiation. You are being initiated, or you're being introduced to a new experience, initiation, into a different realm called the spiritual realm. This is what spirituality is. So it's not mysterious, or spirituality isn't a matter of opinion. So you talk to your Aunt Mary and so, to me, my truth is spirituality is when you believe in Jesus and then money comes to you somehow through magic. That's your opinion, crazy Aunt Mary, but that's not what spirituality is. That's not a definition. And then the next guy goes, no, you know, I respect your opinion, Aunt Mary, but actually spirituality is when you you believe hard enough and you manifest something physical. And then Betty is there with Aunt Mary and her friend Jessica, and Betty says, well, Jessica, I respect your opinion, but what kind of respect is this, by the way? I'm allowing you to have this stupid wrong opinion that's going to harm you if spirituality is important. But you're wrong and stupid, because spirituality actually means it's keeping a dream journal and, you know, whatever. And then a Buddhist would come to the table and say, well, it's my opinion. And a Taoist would say, no, you're wrong. It's my opinion. And a Jew would sit down and say, well, it's my opinion. And a Catholic would sit down and go, well, it's my opinion. And then a Protestant would sit down and say, well, it's my opinion. You're all a bunch of weirdos, because who cares about dumb opinions? By the way, did you all get them from your parents? Yeah, pretty much. Influenced by your culture? Yep. How many people have learned the paradigm through reading the Balboa translation of Socrates? How many people have done this? Philosophical midwifery. Applied the dialectic to uncovering those unsuspected false beliefs that keep you tied to stagnation and ignorance. No one. So we say to that, and then the Buddhists would say, no, you can say womp to Aunt Mary, but I've studied Buddhism for 50 years and I've sat on the mat and I've sat under a waterfall and yada, yada, yada. So don't say that to me. And a Taoist would say, no, but I'm better than that. I did this and then I'd learned martial arts. And then Betty would say, but you're just all brainwashed by your culture. I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and I also read The Power of One by that other guy, and blah, 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 blah. Of course, you all agree with your own opinions. That's what an opinion is. But we're not interested in opinions. We're interested in truth. Now, the definition of spirituality in truth is very, very simple, because it's in the word. It's the spiritual, the spirit, or psyche. That's what we've been talking about. That's what it is. It's not manifesting physical things or whatever, any of those crazy things mentioned in that conversation. So therefore, separating from our body, now you can say it's not just separating from the body, because without the understanding and the paradigm, you might not understand what it is, and you might not be able to navigate that realm very well. You might not go on a good journey, have a bad trip. You might not realize the nature of the good. You might not be able to take it back with you to apply to your dialectic to benefit from it. And you might not have any of those things, so you can develop a mastery of an art, all of which might be needed because that would be the highest form or the highest paradigm of learning itself. So it's not just separating from the body, it's also this paradigm. It's both. So there's two But then you can have all those other parts like benefiting and art and mastery and contributing to human culture and applying it to our justice system so we're not just abusing people, and applying it to our financial system and so on and so on. So you can add more and more to it. But at its essence, it's just understanding the spirit. So what? The dialectic is to function as a spiritual initiation, being initiated or introduced into a different realm. That's what we talked about before when we said some people get into philosophy because they've had an experience first. They were at that concert and they took acid, and then instead of staying with the physical senses of the music, they suddenly left their body. Their body was still dancing, but IENCE, they experienced a whole different different reality. That's initiation. And then they want to make sense of it, and they have to go back. And then they realize that mum and dad made fun of them. The priest called them a devil or a heathen. They talked to their philosophy professors, and then they dismissed you and scoffed and called you a Neanderthal or something, because we don't do that here. And no one's talking about the most profound experience I've ever had. Oh, Socrates is. And he said, this is the most important thing, and you need to understand it. And that's the meaning of life. And you can go beyond it. So that's how we get into philosophy, some people. So that's the spiritual initiation. So what? Well, when Meno only liked the dialectics that apply to the physical things, like how color, not how color is related to shape in being, but how color is related to our physical senses, he said, I like that answer. And he said it's theatrically tragic. Now we understand why, because it's not in philosophy. But also he said, and the reason is, now this is what we've been talking about. Having an art allows you, like being a mechanic, to diagnose the problem and offer a prescription. Meaning you have to get to the cause. So what's the diagnosis? What's the cause of the problem? It's tragic because you left your education before being initiated, remaining and being initiated into the mysteries. What does that mean? Over Meno's head, but we can understand it. He's diagnosing him. You haven't been initiated into a different realm that's non-physical. And you left school, left your education before you could. That's your diagnosis. Okay? So what happens when a doctor who has an art gives a diagnosis? I know what happens. The patient decides what drugs he should take. And then the doctor hands over his doctor pad and then signs the bottom, and the patient writes all the lovely drugs he wants to take. And then says thank you, and he goes on his way. No.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
That's flibbity-gibbity nonsense. That's not what happens. Who prescribes the antidote? The doctor with the art, not the patient, not Aunt Mary, not even the Buddhist or Taoist. So what's the prescription? Meno says, I will remain in my education so long as you give me the answers. Who's doing the prescription? Meno, the patient. Oh.
What in the hell heck are we talking about?
Flibbity-gibbity
I
nonsense.
don't want to eat a monkey.
What in the hell heck are we talking about?
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
That's crazy. So we're learning about Meno. We're learning about the sort of person who gets into philosophy without being initiated, might not even believe there is such a thing as initiation. They don't even believe there is a realm of being, even though they've gone through all these arguments, which is, by the way, something that Socrates' teacher Parmenides pointed out to him. He said, by the way, this is the greatest puzzle, the greatest problem. Even if you follow the proof of the realm of being existing through many elaborate details, through the dialectic, from one practiced and experienced with the art and with natural talent, a skilled artisan, even then, he who himself contends that the idea selves are unknowable, the word is nous and eidos, may still remain unpersuaded. Socrates' teacher told him this when he was 19. That's what we're finding here ourselves. Meno. That's what we can find in our own lives. Even if you have coffee with your friends and you go through all this because you're very skilled and naturally talented in the dialectic, they'll still walk away and say, that's nonsense. I already know everything. Or I know better. They might not even know they're carrying a false belief. They'll be unpersuaded that there is such a thing. And that's what we're seeing in the text. Meno hasn't had the experience. He hasn't been initiated. And his prescription is, give me the answers. By the way, does the dialectic deal with answers? No, it's questions, my friend. Structuring your thought based on questions. It's not belief. It's not opinions. It's not perspective. All of those perspective opinions, that's getting answers. It can be attractive to give answers because you can play the knower. So when somebody says, hey, let me give you advice, run for the hills. Oh, really? How much advice do you have? Let me give you, you want to pretend to give me answers as though you know? How about we do the dialectic? Socrates has the same response. For your sake and my own, I'm not going to give you answers. It's not that I'm not eager to give answers. I can see how attractive it is. But I'm not going to. It's not going to be beneficial. So when the patient comes in and says, oh, well, I've got an illness, can you give me all the drugs? And doctor says, it's not that I'm not eager to give you drugs, but for your sake, your benefit, and for mine as a doctor, I'm not just going to give you the answers. I'm not just going to give you the drugs you want. Let's actually solve the problem. What is the prescription that will allow us to get to not examples, but virtue as a whole? Remember we talked about the car? How does it function as a whole? We're raising to a whole. You can make a joke. When someone breaks something at a party, you'll say, stop making many out of one. It's a very hilarious joke. If anything, philosophy is great because we learn how to be amazingly funny comedians.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Like Joe Rogan.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Okay? Stop making many out of a one. Don't look at the many examples, actually get to the thing itself. The whole, which is sound, good. So we're after the good or soundness. So what is the prescription Socrates gives? Not answers, but a paradigm. Paradigmata. Paradigm. The prescription is a paradigm. That's how you're going to get initiated, my friend Meno. That's your education. That's what the dialectic is really for. He mentioned it before, dialectic. He says, Meno says, if someone doesn't know what color and shape are, what are you going to do? Because those dickheads who try and be heuristic and antagonistic, the debate bros, I would be a bit more hostile and say, hey, don't just say I'm wrong, you idiot. Use the logos to refute me. Show you've got some understanding of reason and logic and the paradigm of thinking, and refute me. If we were friends, of course, and that's what we want. We're not going to, if you guys watching get to the mastery of the dialectic where you can go onto these podcasts and talk to these Jordan Peterson types or go onto these right-wing propaganda networks and actually try and benefit even them and their audience, all the best, all power to you. And join the Discord and let us know how you go. These heuristic and antagonistic, these haters and debate bros, right? And one of the things is say, hey, when they say, oh, I disagree, prove me wrong, like those assholes do, that's a bit harsh. They're not assholes, because assholes serve an important function. These are, propagandists or whatever do. You say, hey, don't just say I'm wrong because you have a different opinion or it's not common sense to you. It's not obvious to you. It's your work to take up the logos and refute me. Then we can address with the logos your refutation. right? That's what we would do if we were in that game. And again, if you get into that, let us know how you go. Share a link in the Discord and in the chat and stuff, and in the comment section of the YouTube, so we can check it out, see how well you did. And there are some people who try. I don't know what sort of success they have. I think Hassan, I've seen him on a couple of right-wing propaganda networks trying to reason with them. The Twitch streamer. Anyway, so, but if we were friends like we are here, I would use the dialectic is the word, and it's a gentle process, the way of the dialectician. Proceeding together with premises, and the one whose questions acknowledge at every level, I acknowledge you actually know something. So we're not throwing opinions at each other. We are building a journey step by step. That's the way of the dialectician and the way I endeavor to converse with you. Then he goes on to give an example of it with shape in being, and then color that relates to our physical senses, giving us two examples. One more easy to be understood in the physical with color, one applying to the realm of being. Meno, so you could say this is a kind of a test. Like the doctor says, or the eye doctor, does this one look fuzzy or does this one look fuzzy? Trying out two different glasses. Does this one look better or does this one look better? Right? And which one looks better to Meno? The physical example. And that's tragic. Theatrically tragic. Well, we would say today, comically tragic. We've been talking about that in the channel too. How do you transition from tragedy to comedy? It's tragic if you're stuck, but if you can see the hilariousness of it and you can see a way out, is that what's needed to go from tragedy to comedy? Seeing a way out? Seeing the absurdity? Seeing it obviously? I don't know. If you're interested, make a dialectic on what's the difference between comedy and tragedy, or do a dialectic on how to transition and share it with us. I'm curious. I'd love to see it. Okay, hilariously tragic what you do. And by the way, you demanding answers from me is even a blind person can say that you're handsome and rich, because that's what spoiled people do. Demand answers. You're not the doctor, my friend. And the only people who can get away with that are really good looking people in the flower of their bloom, young and beautiful. If you're old and ugly, no one's going to listen to you make demands like that, my friend. Even a blind person can say that. And also spoiled, you must be from a rich background, Elon Musk. Right? So Socrates says it, but says it in a nice way. He's got a good bedside manner. Again, part of the art is how do we do it? How do we communicate with our patients? Even someone with a bad bedside manner, like that TV Dr. House, he has some charm. And what does Socrates say? Well, I'm at a disadvantage because I can't make demands because I'm not as beautiful as you. Now, to us, we would say he's insulting Meno, but to Meno, who values physical beauty, as he's just shown, he values the physical dialectic. He's going, oh, that's good. He's giving me a compliment. That's funny and charming. I'm still human. Stay human. It's something that I've heard from Pierre Grimes. Stay human too. Right? So, making demands, whatever, but I'm not going to do that when he said, how am I going to help you go from the many to the one to see what virtue is as a whole? A paradigm. What paradigm? That's for us to piece it together. He says, look, I'm not going, for your sake and my own. So what's that mean? Benefit. I'm not going to answer you in that way. So I'm going to instead give you a paradigm. So we have to piece it together. This is part of reading. Where was another part of the text we've seen where he's talked about how he's going to relate to his questions and answers? Because he's saying, I'm going to give you a paradigm. Paradigm of what? We got to sew it together. So earlier here, he says, another time where he's talked about how I'm going to relate to you. I am going to relate to you as friends in a gentle way called the way of the dialectician, the dialectical way. So we weave that together and we can come to a conclusion that his diagnosis, if you are someone like Meno and you can only point to physical examples, you can't get to the realm of being, you have yet to be initiated, but you want to learn, you want to be smart and wise and knowledgeable, you want to benefit yourself and your friends, you want to become healthy, you want to free yourself from ignorance and prejudice, then the diagnosis Socrates is giving you through 2,500 years of history, again, immortal, eternal, he's talking to you, is the paradigm of the dialectic. Right here. Right here. That's his prescription. He's not going to give you your opinions back to you like Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate or any of the Republicans or the Fox News or anyone like that who just gets your money while just repeating your own opinions back to you, even though most of them know that they're liars and grifters, right? And they've been found out recently taking money from Russia to lie to and abuse and manipulate and cause a disharmony within the Western culture by being grifters. It harms them, and they're getting millions of dollars from the Russians. In the time of recording, it's just been found out that that's been happening. But, you know, it's obvious, of course. Like Donald Trump. Anyway. So, that's not the prescription. Paying Jordan Peterson $2,000 to go to his university online or whatever, or one of those Alpha Bro podcasts or pickup artists. Hey, Andrew Tate University bollocks. That's the marketing scheme, right? We're not doing that. We're not repeating your own opinions. That's going to harm you. For your sake and my own, doing that not only harms the person, but you. Your soul is less just. Your soul is less benefited. It's going to affect you. We want to be our best as we can in our lifetime. So whatever we face after this lifetime that we're not even certain about, we've done our best. And that can be tricky. It can require courage. But it can be unified in a simple way, the way of the dialectician. This is the best. It seems from the text, this is the best we can do. So is that related to virtue? That's the question of the text. So we've got so many questions, all of these things that have come up. Is that virtue? Is that virtue? Is the way of the dialectician virtue? Add that question to your list. But the theatrically tragic, the comedically tragic, hilariously tragic problem that we all have, most people have, is the same one Meno has. And the diagnosis is they have yet to be initiated into the realm of being, into a different level of perceiving other than your physical senses. And we can make a joke. We are in the world of the many. We haven't reached the level of oneness or whole. What is whole and sound? Where we get our definitions, the point of philosophy. So it's tragic if we're blind in that way, but we can make a joke about it. Like someone dropping the vase, you're in the many, you want a one. And the prescription, again, Socrates demonstrating, he's not just defining, he's not just defining for us definition, virtue, whatever it happens to be. He is demonstrating it. And he's probably going to be doing these things at the same time as well. We can look out for them. But definitely, we can see he's not just defining it, he's in the conversation, he's himself an example of it. He's demonstrating it. And in his demonstration of his heart, his heart and his mind, his art, the diagnosis was not letting the rich brat get all the drugs he wants. No. It's learn the paradigm of the dialectic. That's what we've seen. And we had to see it for ourselves. And to weave, even though there's only a 2 or 3 page gap, we still had to do some work. We weren't just given the answer. That's what Meno would want. Rich boys paying money for their degree so they can use, quote, Kant and Hegel's opinions. Because that's what they want. They must be from thumbs down to them. That's kind of what we think, right? People go to university to get a marketing or business degree or whatever because they think that their capitalism is good, because often they're the privileged class. Is that education? Or are they rich boys like Meno? What about the rest of us? What about your soul? What about art? What about having some real fun? Taking that focus and putting it away from money, but on being. Comically tragic, those people. Okay, so we have to do some work. So we are ourselves demonstrating that which we are seeking to define. So both Socrates and us are living dialectics. That's the rub. That's the comedic tragedy of the whole thing. Why? Because you're either a living dialectic like Socrates and us when we read Socrates, defining, demonstrating, seeing, dividing out the dialectic into the text, bringing it together, reflecting with our friends. We are walking dialectics to benefit. If you're not doing that, you're still doing it. You're still a walking dialectic, only you are solidifying the false beliefs about self and reality in your experience. An unsuspected false belief about reality that's causing your problems. You are walking demonstrations of that. There is an unsuspected definition about self itself that you demonstrate in your state of mind and in your life. In every area of your life, like Meno talking to Socrates, Meno talking to his partner, Meno talking to his dad, that then unifies into a conclusion that proves your false belief about yourself right all the way to begin with. A self-fulfilling prophecy functioning as a block to your meaningful goals and a psychic parasite. You are doing that whether you like it or not. Or we could be doing the same thing only to Socrates' words. We're still a living dialectic, only we're doing it to the definitions from the text. We are being a dialectic ourselves. We are applying it to every section of the text. And then we have these podcasts where we do our best to reflect on it, bring it all together, to see the meaning, to come to a better definition of what we are defining in the text. That's today's podcast. It's a review. We have a choice. I mean, our choice isn't whether or not to do the dialectic. You're doing it anyway, because that's reality. That's thinking. That's the unfolding. That's the hero's journey. Our question is, do you want to do it on what's true, side A, or what's false and harmful and causes suffering and keeps you trapped in the chains of suffering and problems and negative states of mind as a self-fulfilling prophecy of your ignorance, and as Socrates says in the Phaedo, imprisoned in the cycle of reincarnation, going through that ignorance, forgetting, suffering over and over again? Or do you want to have fun with us on this channel, in this Discord, and do it on what's true? That's the only really choice we have. Meno or Socrates, that's what's on the table. Right? And it can take courage to go from there to there. What will help is this philosophical midwifery. As we choose the truth and the good, doing a dialectic on what we get from the text here, we can also be doing work over here to lessen the effect of our negative ideas, what we are a living dialectic of anyway, our problems that we live out in our life. That becomes our self-image, becomes our mask, our ego, our way of relating to ourselves and others, keeps us stagnant, keeps us passing on our ignorance to others, like Meno would do to his kid. That's philosophical midwifery. We can do both what's true, which is called perfection, and freeing ourselves from what's false, that's called purification. In the Phaedo, Socrates talks a lot about purification and perfection, escaping fate, inevitable negative consequences that we don't even know the causes of, and finding through understanding and experience of through the paradigm destiny. Very happy for destiny. So that's really the choice. By offering that choice, I am playing, to go back to what we said about the hero's journey, Gandalf's role. So Gandalf says to Harry Potter, no, to Frodo, right? This is the introduction to the spiritual initiation, the introduction to the new world. So we talked about the hero's journey, because someone asked a question, why when we start at home, why, and there's a problem at home, by the way, why, and then there's the crossing of the threshold, into the new world of magic for Harry Potter, of Jedis for Luke Skywalker, and so on. Why do that only to go on this journey to come back around to where we start? What's the point? You say the same thing about music. You start on the root note or the root chord in the key, only to play this song to end up where you started. What's the point? Why don't you just play that note and just say that's the end of the concert? What will the audience say? The audience will say, come on, man, and boo. And what are we talking about here? So this crossing the threshold, often there is something called supernatural aid. This is just the hero's journey. You can look it up online. The supernatural aid that helps here offers a choice. A choice. Right there, here, choice. Do you want to go to Harry Potter school? Do you want to go to Hogwarts? Do you want to go into space to learn about being a Jedi? Whatever. That's the role of Socrates here. Do you want to accept the paradigm into an initiation, into a new world, which has challenges? You have to fight dragons. Hey, or you're going to be a rich kid who lives an easy life like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos or whatever. All their dumb opinions are parroted back in their echo chambers, Puff Daddy or whatever. No one challenges you. You end up like Elon Musk, some sort of fascist who owns the means of production, owns the means of communication, bought Twitter so he can get everyone to agree with his own opinions. Otherwise they get kicked off, so he can fleece them for their money. He can get famous. No one challenges him. He didn't learn anything. He didn't go on any sort of a journey. Are you going to be like that, Elon Musk? I mean, Meno? Or are you going to realize that's negative, that keeps you trapped, keeps you from learning, harming your soul, harming the effect you have on others? There's no learning, and it's not even really fun. That's the call to adventure, or the choice into the crossing of the threshold, or the... let's use yellow. The call to adventure. Adventure. That's the role that we're seeing here. That's the diagnosis. You are a walking dialectic, whether you like it or not, causing your problems and stagnation and harming your soul, preventing your higher experiences of reality, preventing your growth, causing a negative effect when you die, keeping you trapped in the prison of reincarnation. You're doing it anyway. You're in the game anyway, by virtue of being a human being. Your choice is, do you want to do that on what's true, or keep suffering in what's false? So last time we were talking about the role of suffering. Some people who are interested in spirituality, like the Buddha, wants to address suffering. Why is there suffering in the world? I don't know if Buddha got to the answer. He had an experience of something, but without the paradigm, perhaps. So with the paradigm, what we call the dialectic, we can say, oh, what's the cause of suffering? Easy. You are doing this anyway, just on what doesn't exist, what's false. The cause of suffering is doing that and not learning the rules of the game to do it on what's true. Now, that call to adventure is, or applying the dialectic, doing what you're doing anyway, but onto what's true, not what's familiar or what you happen to be brought up with, or what's your mask or persona, right? You like to fight people. People give you beers at the pub because they're scared of you. I like that way of being. I'm not going to change. That's harming you. That's what's false. That's not actually virtue, beating people up or whatever. That's the call to adventure. And you can do a story of that. There are lots of stories. I don't know. Let's just pick one at random. That Boston one. Good Will Hunting. He thought it was good to drink beers and punch people until he learned that being super clever was actually better. It allowed you to understand the cause of your problems and evolve and have better relationships. Good Will Hunting by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Lots of stories like that. But all stories are like that. All hero's journey has someone starting here and then introducing that. Now, good stories also have to have both this, which is formally philosophy. So yeah, it's not your fault in chat, yeah. So formally philosophy is doing this. Yeah, and then all the people in chat are crying now because they're remembering Robin Williams say, it's not your fault that you wanted to punch people and be a tough guy. So stop crying, it's okay. Right. But a good story will also have, that's philosophy, also have philosophical midwifery, which is what we do on the channel as well, which is not just doing this, but finding the cause of that, addressing it, solving it, resolving it, and freeing yourself from its effects. That's philosophy and midwifery, purification and perfection and purification. Both of which are needed. That's why we have midwifery series on this. Okay. Oh, and if you are talking about the Avengers game, one of my sound drops has a guy who starts quoting Kant and different people and stuff. But he says, "Oh, have you even watched Avengers?" Like he's making fun of those people. But even in the last Avengers movie, Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, the three main heroes of the story, go back in time, each of them through time machines and various things, or magic and time machines. I mean, that's the benefit of mythology. You can ascribe superpowers to allow these people to do midwifery and philosophy in a way that's easier to see physically for people who haven't been initiated into philosophy and midwifery. So we're doing this without superpowers. So we are the greatest hero, or the archetype, or the paradigm of the actual hero in the actual hero's journey. But you can give superpowers for people to do a metaphor. So what's their superpowers? Well, they have superpowers, but they also have time travel abilities. They all go back to meet their parents. The people who introduced what's false. Captain America, Iron Man and Thor go back to address it. Now, the problem with the movie is they got close. They recognized that the hero has to do the heroic thing as well as address their false beliefs that were causing their problems. And they needed to have a problem, otherwise it wouldn't have been an interesting movie. There would be no character development. So you need to have a problem. There's a reason you're suffering. It would be a boring life. Like your dreams have problems. You would get bored in your dreams if it was all win-win-win. character development. The difference is, do you want to stay suffering, or do you want to learn the art of applying the dialectic? That's Socrates' diagnosis, the gentle way, the dialectic. So you're not fighting everyone or using magic to zap your enemies like Meno would do if he was a superhero. That's the dialectic. That's the dialectic applied to your problems. That's philosophical midwifery. So there's a reason why you have your problems and your suffering in your life and in your dreams. To make it interesting and to provide the, what's the word in film? The motivation for the character development. The impetus for you to actually leave the moisture farm if you're talking about Star Wars. Leave the bedroom under the step-parents' stairs if you're Harry Potter. That's for you, your dreams in your life. Play out your problems that you have to. We don't have to, but you'll stay stuck in suffering, Buddha. If you don't, learn the dialectic applied to what's false, philosophical midwifery, and to lessen the blocks and the problems and the suffering. But also, being free of problems and suffering isn't enlightenment. You apply that freedom to learning what's true. You need both. So even if you separate from your body, which itself, because you're less attached to your physical sensations that you're identified with, your physical mannerisms, different physical pains, you can lessen the effect of your problem through enlightenment experiences or separating from your body. It does diminish to a degree. Doesn't remove them though. But you can use that diminishment to better do philosophy, better do this. And after you do that and you come back, you're still going to be having problems. You can be learning what's true side of the dialectic out of your body, but then when you come back to your problems, make sure you're also applying it to philosophical midwifery to completely free yourself from what's false. Now that's what all movies need to have and try to have, because they're following the hero's journey, but they lack the logos to actually say, this is what it's about. This is what Thor is doing or needs to be doing. This is what Captain America needs to be doing. The true hero's journey, which is literally the invitation Socrates is offering us right now. He is Gandalf. And what's the equivalent to Harry Potter? Haggard, the guy who says to Harry Potter, right? It's just a standard trope, a standard feature. You're doing it anyway. Your choice, your call to adventure is a choice. Do you want to do it well and true? Or do you want to stay stuck in your problems? Hagrid, thank you. So it seems like an easy decision, but you tell me, how easy is it for you to pick up this? Is it easy, even though it seems simple and obvious? You're in the game anyway, why not do the true thing? Send ad, put your comments in the chat, in the comment section on YouTube. So another way of saying the call to adventure or offering of the choice to enter the new world is the diagnosis. The diagnosis is the paradigm of the dialectic. That's the new activity. That's the magic that Harry Potter learns at magic school. Hogwarts. Hagrid is at Hogwarts, right? Hogwarts Magic College. I think that's what it's called. That's us. So, and as you do it, add it to your art. Like, mythologize it, make movies and stuff. You'll probably be doing it better because you know the paradigm that exists in being, that the other ones are imitations of without having the knowledge. So, if you do make movies using this, then send a link, put the link in the comment section and join the Discord and tell us about it. So that's where we are. We've had he's offered him, here are two dialectics. Which one do you like? Like an eye doctor? Does it look clearer with this? Or this? Or this? Or this? I like the physical one. Okay. Now I can see it. I mean, Socrates probably saw it straight away, because one of the first things Socrates says was, The first thing Meno says is virtue teachable? First thing Socrates says is, I'm going to tell you all about your past. You are one of the Thesians. I'm going to tell you what culture you're from. I'm going to tell you how it relates to the ideal culture, the Hellenes. I can tell you that they're also related to other cultures that think this way, the Lacinians, the way you think. I can tell you that you have a certain idea of wisdom. I'm not going to tell you right now that it's wrong, but it comes from a teacher. I can tell you your teacher. I can tell you about your partner. I can tell you about your family. I can tell you the habits of your wisdom, giving answers in a fearless and grand style. He does all this. He can see right through him straight away, as a good doctor will with a patient. An architect, I can look at that house and I know all about his problems. I can tell what architect school he's from. I can tell what sort of, same thing, but the soul. All right, and so I prefer this dialectic. That's comedically tragic. Comedically tragic. You need to be initiated. That's the cause. How do you get initiated? The prescription, the diagnosis of the cause, another prescription. This is what you need. This is the remedy. This is the call to adventure. This is the crossing the threshold. To Meno, yes, but really to you. To you. It's for you. Our question is whether or not Meno accepts it within the narrative, but that's just the narrative. Thor and Iron Man and stuff, that's not real. It's a narrative. It should impact us if it gets close to teaching us the truth. So this is not just an invitation to Meno, it's to you. Are you willing to cross the threshold? And the diagnosis to you is the paradigm of the dialectic. Okay, that's how important it is. And how wonderful it is that we have the Balboa translation. So we dance. And that's what we're going to look at next. The unfolding of the paradigm of the dialectic in action, in demonstration, as an art to benefit our friend Meno and us. So we are going to hopefully relate to Meno and be benefited, but also at the same time relate to Socrates and learn the art ourselves. And then while doing both, we can wonder which one is virtue? Or how are they both parts of virtue? Because that's the theme that unifies the whole thing. So we're going to look at his steps that he makes. Meno starts with a quote. What's virtue? Can you use the dialectic as a paradigm? No, but I can quote a poet. The modern day equivalent would be quoting the Bible. The Bible says this, or the Quran says this, or the Torah says this. That would be or the founding fathers say this. That's the modern equivalent. Here's a quote that agrees with all of the opinions I already hold. All right. Most people are in that camp. Understandably so, because where else are you going to get your understanding from? If you want to give an understanding of what's true, you have to ask, where does truth come from? That's philosophy. That's what the dialectic points to. That's the realm of being. But a way around that is to quote someone else. Now, you could say that's just kicking the can up the street. That's just the same problem one step removed, because you can say, what makes the founding father know what's true? Same question. What makes the Bible know what's true? What makes the Quran know what's true? What makes the Vedic scriptures or the Torah know what's true? Same question. But the trick is, well, I don't know, I'm washing my hands. Don't we just pretend that we know that what the founding fathers are saying is true? Don't we just all pretend that everything in the Bible is true? And then someone who's not in that religion pulls their hair out and goes, have you read it? It's contradicting itself, and it's nonsense, and it's harmful, and it's terrible. Slavery and raping people, mass genocide, none of that's good. Oh, shut up. Same question. You're just kicking the can down the road. What makes this poet that he's quoting know what's true? Does he have the paradigm to reach the model which becomes the paradigmatic ideal that's always true? Same question. Right. So yeah, in chat you can provide evidence from their own book that it's self-contradictory or it's harmful or whatever, but that's missing the point. I mean, that might make them curious, like, oh yeah, I guess I don't have a paradigm or model for what's true. But in my experience, those people didn't get into their religion through reason. So it's almost impossible for them to get out through reason. That's why they need midwifery. What made religion believable? It's faith. It means to believe stuff that's not provable or has been disproven, to disbelieve your own thinking. Often you're told your thinking is stupid, you are a sinner, you're not as good as Jesus, so shut up. So they'll undermine their reasoning. I don't know, maybe you're better at it than I am, but what seems to be working better is asking them, where did you learn this, by the way? What convinced you in the first place? What convinced Meno in the first place of this poet? Because the poet happens to agree with whatever he wants anyway. He's just like the way people do religion. They cherry pick. What about this thing? No, shut up. I'm cherry picking this to agree with the opinions I already hold. Every single debate with a religious person is exactly that. It doesn't change. They cherry pick things that agree with their opinions, and then someone says, what about this? And then they try and use rhetoric, what is called in here the heuristic, which means bullshit talker, and antagonistic, fighter. You're my enemy. Right, guys? And they always try and get the crowd on your side. Like, let's laugh at this guy. Let's make him our enemy, because that's what religion is. In-group, out-group. Let's make this guy who's questioning us our enemy. And in these debates on YouTube, that doesn't work because they're usually there to learn. They're not interested in picking sides. So the religious person gets made fun of, unless it's in a church and it works. But it's just the antagonistic sort of bullshit. Where's the quote? But it always goes the same way. I'm going to cherry pick quotes from a poet that agree with my opinions, or maybe the opinions of the crowd, because I need to get money from them, or I need to get likes from them, or I need to get them on my side. And then here we go, heuristic and antagonistic kind. Wise ones in inverted commas, sarcastically. They're not actually wise. And then the person on the other side of the debate just points to other quotes and says, well, there's no principle here. You're just cherry picking quotes. And then the religious person says, shut up. So that's what it is. And that's what Meno is doing here as well. It's the same for always. It's almost as though there is a paradigm in human behavior, or a paradigm in the evolution of mind or consciousness. Humans evolve. The species that evolved blindly obeyed what the tribe leader within the cave did when we were cavemen. They survived because they didn't ask questions, they didn't venture out on their own, they didn't get eaten by saber-toothed tigers. And then we evolve reason to understand patterns. We know, oh, saber-toothed tigers won't eat us if we do this. Then we understand the patterns of the environment so we can get farming and stuff like that. Now we are evolving into logos. We can reason and talk and have language. All of these are parts of logos. Now we realize, oh, okay, when you're evolving into logos, you have to ask the question, what makes something true? What is virtue? And we have to, that's philosophy. We also have to free ourselves from that caveman way of just blindly obeying the leader, which is what Meno is doing. What's the leader? Family. What do? They quote the Bible, or quote the poets, or quote the founding fathers. Same bullshit. So in 2,500 years, we still haven't evolved from Socrates. But he is diagnosing us now, through time, and offering us the prescription. After we get logos, we have to learn philosophical midwifery to free ourselves from the false beliefs, using the same dialectic, by the way, only on what's false. And then learn what's true. That's what we're doing here. That's the importance of what's here. It also is giving us the paradigm to free ourselves from what's false if we apply it to the philosophical midwifery. So win-win. But same now as always. Here is a quote that already agrees with me. Same question. What's the paradigm that he's using? I don't know. Ask him. So if this is what we find in our world, and makes sense, if all of the translations of Socrates have been bastardizations because of the pathologos within culture that we failed to address, because we hadn't rediscovered philosophical midwifery, and only now do we have philosophical midwifery reawakened. Only now we have the Balboa translation. Then we can evolve to the next level. What would that be? Mastering the logos. The logos is what took us from animals to humans. Now we have to go to the highest aspect of it. Use it properly. Not use language to insult people. Not use language to justify inequality and capitalism and fascism and war. Not just use language to make someone our enemy, in-group, out-group, caveman bullshit. They're a heathen. They're a dirty Palestinian. They're a, sinner. They're from a bad country. We're not using language for division and ignorance, using language properly, as an art. That would benefit ourselves and others. It will benefit you, who I'm talking to, and me, says Socrates. That would, rationally speaking, fairly speaking, be the next stage of our evolution, and what we need to do to benefit ourselves and also our friends and contribute to humanity and all that stuff. But mainly we do it first and foremost for ourselves. What is it? The paradigm of the dialectic. What's the paradigm? Doesn't look like he's going to give it to us, but he's going to give us the material we need to learn it for ourselves. That's the difference. We're not being given the answer. I'm not going to give you answers in the way you want, because you are a spoiled brat. You're only getting away with it because you're being a petty tyrant demanding answers, because you happen to be young and beautiful and rich. Even a blindfolded person could realize that by how tyrannical you are. What makes him tyrannical? He just wants answers from Socrates. Is that tyrannical? Wouldn't you want answers from Socrates? It's not going to benefit you. So in a similar way, Socrates, what's the paradigm of the dialectic that's our next stage of evolution and we need for our spiritual initiation, our evolution of our soul, and the very thing we're supposed to be doing while we're here to benefit ourselves in this life and the next? What might very well be virtue. What's the question of the text? What is virtue? Well, can virtue be taught? Tell me, Socrates, tell me, give me the answer. Is virtue teachable? And Socrates says, you better figure out what virtue is first, what excellence of the soul is, before you know what it can be taught. That was the very first sentence and very first page. So we need to figure out what virtue is. It seems to be from the text something to do with this diagnosis, the paradigm of the dialectic. And we would say, oh, if that's what we need, then tell us. Can you tell us, Socrates? And he said, hey, shut up. If you're asking Socrates that, he's calling you a beautiful, spoiled brat, petty tyrant. And you must, if you're the sort of person who demands answers, that's not only is that tragic because you're not going to get initiated, it's not going to be helpful for you, but you're a spoiled person and a tyrant. And you better be beautiful if you're going to make demands like that. So, wouldn't we want the paradigm of the dialectic? Well, if that's virtue, can it be told to us? If not, we might have to do some investigation to learn it ourselves, not be taught. What happens if you were told? Well, it's either going to be an opinion you already agree with, and then you can just quote Socrates, like on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and stuff. The way people use Socrates now is to selectively cherry pick quotes, which are usually misquotes because they don't have the Balboa, to justify the opinions they already have. And people either already agree and give them likes, or disagree and ignore, or get into a flame war on their comment section. That's as far as you go with just being told the answers. Staying at the level of opinions, which is stupid and stuck. So he's not going to give us an answer because that's just going to be an opinion that's going to harm us. In order to benefit you and me, I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm not going to give you an opinion. I'm going to give you what you need to pull yourself out of those things to learn with. I'm going to give you the material that you yourself can organize in a fun game, a mystery. This is the call to adventure. Harry Potter isn't just zapped his wisdom into his head. He has to go to Hogwarts and learn how to do all the spells and Leviosa and stuff and do the thing with the zapping of the wand. He has to learn. That's what made it interesting. Same with Luke Skywalker. You have to learn. You're not here to get quotes to justify your opinions. That's how philosophy is taught. But it's bullshit. Don't buy Jordan Peterson's fake university course that's just going to give you quotes that you can use to justify the opinions you already have. Same thing with Andrew Tate's bullshit course. And modern European academic tradition, more or less. This Socrates is playing a different game. Giving us what we need to have fun with, to organize and understand and reflect on and talk over coffee with our friends. But he is giving us some hints. What you are going to be developing is a paradigm. And if you're paying attention and can weave together the text, you'll realize it's a paradigm of the... it's probably a paradigm of the way of the dialectic, the way of the dialectician, the dialectical way. And it might be to do with virtue. And when you get it, you'll be able to tell me, please, in chat and in the comment section and in the Discord. Please join the Discord. There's a link below. Once you get this, let us know. Is it virtue? And let us know, how did you learn it? Please share your development, your journey, your growth, your insights, your questions, your puzzles. Share it with the rest of us because it's not a one-person game. Even Socrates is talking to Meno here. So, giving us a clue. Probably a paradigm, probably do the dialectic. And then if you do it, let us know how you go. Let us know if you think it's virtue, and let us know whether or not it was taught or what you had to go through to learn it. And share your fun with the rest of us. On that note, thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next time. Do all the things that we say every time. Like and subscribe to YouTube, follow on Twitch, donate if you want to, join the Discord. There might be a Patreon too. Check that out and have fun. Share your fun with us. And now we have some stakes behind us. These are the stakes. This is what makes it interesting. This is why Harry Potter has to leave. This is why Luke Skywalker has to go into space, because the universe is in peril. Same thing for us. It's not the universe, but even better. It's literally better than saving the universe in Star Wars. It's your soul, which can outlive the universe if it's immortal and the universe is physical. So that's the importance of this call to adventure. That's the significance of what we're doing. And hey, it's a call to adventure to the greatest possible hero's journey. Something to do with mastering the paradigm of the dialectic. That's what we're doing here. I'll see you next time.